Before sunrise, while Ruby Basin still lay gray under the last stars, Royce Vale rode to Hannah Vale's front gate and nailed a cattle notice to the cedar post. He did not knock or call her name. He hammered 3 hard blows into the wood, then sat in the saddle and looked toward the dark square of her kitchen window. The paper snapped in the wind after he rode away. By first light, a freighter headed for Bell's store had stopped his wagon to read it. 2 boys driving milk goats paused behind him. A widow from the North Ridge leaned out of her buckboard. Before the sun cleared the basin rim, 6 people stood at Hannah's gate. The notice claimed 3 Vale steers had strayed onto Hannah Vale's place because she had neglected her fences and lost count of her herd. It warned buyers and neighbors not to deal in any cattle she offered until Royce could inspect the matter himself. At the bottom, Royce had added that anyone extending goods or credit to Hannah did so at his own risk. That last line brought the first laugh. The freighter read it again for the boys, and one asked whether coffee counted as credit. The other said Mrs. Vale had been seen crossing the dry wash before breakfast with an empty tin, same as a beggar at a church supper. The widow told him to hush, yet she stayed. Inside, Hannah heard the laughter before she knew about the paper. She stood at the stove with an empty coffee tin in one hand and the other wrapped in a strip of flour sack where fence wire had bitten 2 fingers the night before. She had slept in her dress after checking the west pasture past midnight. She set the empty tin on the table and opened the cupboard. A heel of bread sat under a cloth. A jar held 3 spoonfuls of beans. The coffee shelf was bare except for a brown ring where the tin had stood. Hannah took the tin again, shook it once, heard nothing, and closed the cupboard. Outside, the boys whispered that she must still be asleep. One said ladies who borrowed coffee before dawn had reasons for keeping curtains shut. The freighter folded his arms as if the house owed him an answer. Hannah lifted the bar from the door and stepped onto the porch. The whispers stopped. She walked down the path with the empty tin. She looked first at the people, then at the notice, and her face gave them nothing. She read every line. When she reached the warning about credit, her fingers closed around the coffee tin until the thin metal popped. The boys backed a step from the gate. "Royce wrote this?" the widow asked, though the name sat plain at the bottom. "Royce nailed it," Hannah said. "Says your fences are poor," the freighter said. Hannah looked toward the south pasture. "My west fence held last night." "Paper says different." "Paper can say it rained." The boys laughed because they thought she had made a joke for them. Hannah's eyes moved to them, and the laugh failed. She reached for the nail with her bandaged fingers, then stopped when hoofbeats sounded on the road. Caleb Marlowe came down from the north with a sack of oats tied behind his saddle and a coil of harness over one shoulder. He had left early to beat the heat, expecting to pass Hannah's gate with one quiet look toward her porch. Instead, he found half the road blocked. He saw the town laughing before he understood why. He saw crooked smiles, lowered eyes, and the empty coffee tin in Hannah's hand. Then he read the notice until his gaze reached Royce's name. Caleb dismounted. "Mrs. Vale," he said, keeping his voice easy. "I was starting to wonder whether my coffee had grown famous enough to draw a line from your porch to mine." The freighter chuckled, ready to take the joke the wrong way. Hannah turned toward Caleb. "Your coffee is not that fine, Mr. Marlowe." "Then I will blame the company, not the beans." The teasing line landed softly because Caleb did not reach for her and did not claim her in front of the road. Hannah's mouth almost lifted. It was gone in a blink, but Caleb saw it. One boy said, "Royce says she is over there every morning." Caleb looked at him. "Does he?" "Folks see it." "Folks see the sun rise too. They do not always know what it is warming." The widow made a small sound, almost approval. Hannah worked the notice loose until the paper tore around the nail. Caleb stood close enough to help if asked and far enough not to make a show. She pulled the paper free, folded it once, and tucked it into her skirt pocket. "You going to answer it?" the freighter asked. "Yes," Hannah said. "How?" "By finding my missing cattle before Royce counts them for me." The freighter looked at the tin and the coffee. Hannah did not answer. That silence traveled through the little crowd faster than a spoken reply. Caleb saw the shift. The coffee tin had become more interesting than the cattle notice, and Royce had likely meant it too. If you are following Hannah's fight at this gate, subscribe and stay with the story, because the coffee tin will matter more than Ruby Basin thinks. Hannah turned from the gate and started toward the dry wash. She did not go inside for a shawl or give the crowd the pleasure of watching her hide. The empty tin swung once at her side, catching a pale stripe of sunrise along its dented rim. Caleb gathered his reins and followed at a respectful distance. He did not offer his arm or order the others away. He simply led his horse after her while the watchers broke apart. The dry wash cut between Hannah's place and Caleb's lower pasture, a pale scar of sand, stone, and rabbit brush. Hannah climbed down the bank without looking back. Her boot slid once in loose gravel. Caleb's hand moved on instinct, then stopped before it reached her elbow. "Careful there," he said. "I crossed this wash before you owned that saddle." At the wash bottom, Hannah paused beside hoofprints pressed deep into the bank. Caleb saw her notice them. "Yours?" he asked. "Some. Royce's. Maybe." "That means yes, but you cannot prove it yet." Hannah looked up at him, and the look held more fatigue than anger. "It means I have cattle short, a notice on my gate, and neighbors counting my coffee visits instead of my brands." Beyond the far bank, smoke had begun to rise from Caleb's kitchen chimney. The sight made Hannah's grip tighten on the empty tin. "How many head short?" he asked. "5 I can name, maybe 6 if Juniper's calf did not turn up overnight. Your bell cow would not leave easy." "No." Royce posted that notice before daylight. "He wanted people to read it before I did." "He wanted me to read it too." Hannah resumed walking. "Then you have read it." They climbed the far bank. Caleb opened his lower gate and stepped aside. Hannah stopped outside it. "I can come to the kitchen step," she said. "I do not need to come in." "I know. And I can pay when my account is free." "I know that too." "Then do not look as if you are deciding how much mercy weighs." Caleb looped his reins over the gatepost. "I am deciding whether to grind fresh or give you yesterday's. Mercy has nothing to do with bad coffee." That nearly won a smile, but hoofbeats sounded on the ridge. Royce Vale rode along the road above the wash with 2 men behind him. He slowed just enough to let them see him, then continued toward town. Caleb watched him disappear behind the rise. "He is headed to Bell's." "Of course he is." "You plan to go there after this?" "I need salt and lamp oil." "On credit." "Until I sell beef." Caleb did not ask whether Bell would extend it now. The answer had been nailed to her gate. He opened his mouth, closed it, then said, "I have salt." "I did not come for salt." "No, you came for coffee you do not drink." Hannah's eyes snapped to him. The words had been gentle, but they struck. Caleb had heard the rumor for 2 weeks, Mrs. Vale at Marlowe's before sunrise, Mrs. Vale carrying a tin. He had ignored it when it stayed behind hands and porch posts. Now Royce had tied it to cattle and credit. Hannah took 1 step back. "I should go." "I am sorry." "You repeated what they say." "I repeated what I see, and I should have had better sense." She looked toward his house. Tom Baird, Caleb's hired man, appeared at the barn door, saw Hannah, and withdrew without speaking. That small retreat told Hannah the rumor had reached even this yard. "I do not drink coffee," she said. Caleb kept still. "I have never liked it. My mother said it tasted like burnt rope." "Then why ask me for it?" Her face closed. He regretted the question at once. "I cannot tell you that," she said. "Cannot or will not?" "Both." Caleb nodded. "Then I will not press." She studied him, measuring whether that promise would hold. Caleb leaned back against the gate. "How much?" he asked. "Enough for 3 mornings." "I have it." "Then I will take only what I asked for." He went to the house and left the door open behind him, neither inviting talk nor making secrecy of her waiting outside. Hannah stayed by the gate. A drawer opened. A tin lid scraped. Coffee poured with a soft rush. Caleb returned with a folded cloth packet tied with string. He had not filled her empty tin himself. That choice slowed her hand, because it left the tin hers and the decision hers. "Fresh ground," he said. "Enough for 3 mornings if whoever drinks it does not brew it strong enough to stand a spoon." Hannah took the packet. "I said I do not drink it." "I heard you." "Then do not make a face like a judge." "I was making a face like a man grieving for wasted coffee." "There is no account between us for this," he said. "Not charity, not courtship payment. I borrowed your bull twice when mine turned fence-shy, and last spring you sent quinine when Tom shook with fever. Let this stand in the ordinary line of neighborly sense." "Royce will not call it ordinary." "Royce is welcome to be wrong before breakfast and again after supper." "He will use your name." "He already did without asking me." "He will say I came here and you gave it." "That would be true." "He will say more." Caleb's humor left him. "Then he will have to build the lie himself. I will not help him by acting ashamed." Hannah held his gaze. Something passed between them, not a promise and not a claim, but the dangerous beginning of trust in a place where trust could cost land and cattle. Then a wagon rattled on the road above them, and the moment broke. "I have to go to Bell's," she said. "I had oats to deliver there before Royce learned hammer work." "Do not follow like a guard." "I will ride in my own time. You walk in yours." Hannah opened the gate herself, passed through, and closed it behind her. Caleb waited until she had reached the bottom of the dry wash before he saddled again. Even then, he tightened a strap that did not need tightening and watched her climb the far bank with the coffee tin held close. By the time Hannah reached Bell's store, Ruby Basin had fully woken. The store stood where the stage road met the ranch track, with a worn porch and a hitch rail. Royce's bay stood tied closest to the steps. Hannah saw the horse and kept walking. Inside, 3 women stood near the cracker barrel, buying thread and listening to nothing they would admit to hearing. Old Mr. Bell worked behind the counter. His daughter, Nora Bell, held the ledger against her waist. Nora saw Hannah come in and looked first at the coffee tin. Royce stood beside the counter with a paper sack of sugar he had not paid for yet. His coat was brushed clean, and his hat made idleness look like authority. "Well," Royce said, loud enough for every shelf to hear, "there is the busiest coffee tin in Ruby Basin." The women turned. Mr. Bell's pencil stopped moving. Nora's fingers tightened on the ledger until the leather cover bent. Hannah walked to the counter. "I need salt and lamp oil." Royce looked at the tin. "Not coffee." "No." "Strange. A body would think coffee was the first need at your place these days." One woman lowered her eyes. Another looked from Hannah to Royce, hungry for scandal. Hannah set the tin on the counter. "Salt and lamp oil," she repeated. Mr. Bell cleared his throat. "Mrs. Vale about the account." Nora turned sharply. "Pa." Royce shifted his smile to Nora. "No shame in careful trade, Miss Bell. Your father runs a store, not a poorhouse." Nora flinched as if Royce had snapped a strap near her cheek. Then she looked away, down at the ledger, and would not meet Hannah's eyes. The flinch struck Hannah harder than the laugh at the gate. Nora knew something, or feared something, maybe both. "My account has never gone unpaid," Hannah said. Royce shook the sugar sack lightly. "Accounts are paid from sound herds. A woman who cannot keep track of her stock ought not deepen debt on cattle that may not be hers to sell." "My cattle carry my brand." "When a brand can be seen." Royce turned toward the women. "But in brush country with fences down and a widow borrowing coffee before daylight, confusion grows easy." The store leaned in. Royce made poison sound like concern. In one breath he turned a missing herd into a story about her character. "You posted a notice on my gate before sunrise," Hannah said. "I warned honest buyers." "You warned them before you checked your own pasture." Royce's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Hannah." "I have been careful. That is why I still know what is mine." Mr. Bell's pencil rolled off the ledger. Nora bent too quickly to pick it up. When she rose, her eyes were damp, and she turned toward the lamp oil shelf. Royce noticed, "Leave it, Nora." Nora stopped with her hand halfway to the tin measure. Hannah looked at her, "Miss Bell." Nora swallowed, "Pa handles accounts." Mr. Bell rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Maybe for a day or two, Mrs. Vale, until matters are settled." "My cattle need salt today." "I understand." "No," Hannah said quietly. "You understand Royce is standing here." The old man's face reddened. Royce set the sugar sack down with a slow slap. "That mouth is why folks worry for you," he said. "A widow alone can get notions. She hears a neighbor pour coffee in the dark and mistakes it for standing." Hannah did not move, but Nora did. She flinched again, then looked toward the back door as if she expected someone to come through it. Royce stepped half a pace to block her view. That was the clue. Royce was not merely enjoying himself. He was watching Nora, keeping her in place and measuring every twitch of her face. The bell over the store door rang. Caleb Marlowe entered with a feed order folded in his hand. He read the room. The women too still, Mr. Bell too red, Nora too pale, Royce too pleased. Then his eyes rested on the coffee tin. "Bell," Caleb said, "I need those oats put on my account." Mr. Bell seized the ordinary request. "Yes, Mr. Marlowe, Tom's usual mix." "Usual?" Caleb stepped aside as if he had only come on business. "And add Mrs. Vale's salt and lamp oil to my order." Hannah turned on him. "No." "Then sell me salt and lamp oil," Caleb said, still looking at Bell, "and I will decide where my purchases ride." Royce laughed. "There it is, morning charity in full daylight." Caleb looked at him. "If I buy salt, Royce, it remains salt. Your talent for making it gossip does not change the barrel." The women shifted. One hid a smile behind her glove. Hannah kept her eyes on Caleb. "I said no," she told him. "I heard you, so here is the fairer way. I need 2 sacks mended before Saturday. You mend them, I send salt and oil across the wash. Store gets paid. Cattle get salt. Nobody owns anybody." The room waited. Royce waited most eagerly, because refusal would leave her cornered and acceptance would let him call it dependence. Hannah set the tin down again. 2 sacks. 3 if you want the oil full. 2 sacks and a torn cinch cover. That cinch cover is a crime, but yes. Then it is trade. Plain trade. Nora moved before Royce could speak. She measured the salt, filled the oil, and set both on the counter. Her hand shook when she corked the oil. A drop ran over the side. Royce watched it as if it had betrayed him. "Nora," he said softly. She froze. "Miss Bell," Hannah said, "thank you." Nora looked at her once. The glance held apology, fear, and warning. Then she lowered her eyes. Royce picked up his sugar. "A woman can dress a leash in trade if she likes." Caleb took 1 step toward the counter. "You have said enough about Mrs. Vale for one morning." The store changed. The women stopped pretending to shop. If Caleb pushed too hard, Royce would use him as proof. If he backed away, Royce would own the floor. Royce smiled without warmth. "Are you speaking as neighbor or suitor?" Caleb did not look at Hannah for permission to claim her. "I am speaking as a man buying oats in a store where a cattle notice has become an excuse for cheap talk." "You always did like lost causes." "Only the ones that expose lazy men." For a heartbeat, the store held the feel of a corral when a mean bull lowers his head. Then the stage driver pushed the door open, bringing in daylight and road noise. Royce stepped back first. He laid coins on the counter for the sugar. "Count your cattle, Hannah," he said, "before someone else counts them better." "I already have." "Then you know you are short." "Yes." "Careful where you look for them." The warning should have sounded foolish in front of half the store. Instead, Nora's face lost color. She turned the ledger around and began writing numbers that made no sense. The coffee rumor was not the heart of the matter. It was smoke. Royce walked out. Through the front window, Hannah saw him speak to one of the men waiting outside. The rider looked toward the south road and nodded. Caleb paid for his oats and the goods. He did not touch Hannah's coffee tin. He did not offer to carry it. He stepped back and let her lift the salt herself, then took the heavier oil tin only when she gave a short nod. "I will send Tom for the mending," he said. "I will have it done by Friday. Saturday is soon enough." "Friday. Then Friday." Nora slid a small paper packet across the counter. "Matches," she whispered. Hannah looked down. "I did not ask for these." "The box was torn. Pa cannot sell it full price." Mr. Bell turned sharply, but Nora did not take the packet back. Royce's horse moved outside the window. Nora's throat worked. "Thank you," Hannah said. Nora's eyes flicked toward the back room. "Be careful crossing the wash after dark." Caleb heard it, so did Hannah. Before either could ask, Nora stepped away to help the stage driver with tobacco, and the moment closed. Hannah left the store with the salt under one arm, the coffee tin in her hand, and Caleb carrying the lamp oil 2 paces behind her. On the porch, the boys from the gate had gathered again. One looked at the tin and smirked. Hannah stopped in front of him. "Your mother still take in washing?" The boy blinked. "Yes, ma'am." "Tell her I have 2 shirts and a sheet for her tomorrow if she wants the work." The smirk vanished. Work changed the shape of a woman's name faster than scolding did. The boy nodded, suddenly young and unsure. Caleb set the lamp oil in Hannah's small wagon. One wheel spoke had a fresh scrape. He noticed. Hannah noticed him noticing. "It happened yesterday," she said. "On the South Road. Near the wash. Blocked. Crowded." He did not ask by whom. Royce's rider was still visible near the livery, watching them. Hannah loaded the salt. Caleb stepped away. On the porch, watchers measured everything, how near he stood, whether he took the reins, whether she softened toward him. He let the reins hang. "Mrs. Vale," he said lightly, "about those sacks. If you mend them too pretty, Tom will accuse me of courting above my station." Hannah looked over the wagon side. "Mr. Marlowe, if courtship depends on feed sacks, Ruby Basin is poorer than I thought." The stage driver laughed. One of the women smiled. The sound did not erase Royce's notice, but it knocked one nail from it. Royce's rider pushed away from the livery rail and went inside. Hannah climbed onto the wagon seat. Caleb waited by his horse. He wanted to warn her about Nora's words and ride behind her until she reached her gate. Instead, he watched what the road showed him. When Hannah turned toward home, the rear wheel dragged slightly before straightening. The coffee tin sat beside her boot, dull and harmless looking. She kept one hand near it as if a bump might spill more than grounds. Caleb mounted and rode to the feed shed, where he could see the South Road. Royce came out of the livery with the same rider and pointed toward the low mesquite beyond Hannah's place, not toward his own range. By the time Caleb rode back toward his ranch, Hannah's wagon was halfway across the dry wash. The sun stood higher now, bright on the sand. Her team slowed where the wheels sank. She clicked her tongue and leaned forward, coaxing them without panic. The coffee tin tipped as the wagon jolted. Hannah caught it before it fell. For one unguarded second, her face showed fear, not of losing coffee, but of losing time. She looked toward the south bank, toward a line of scrub that led nowhere useful unless a person knew of an old trail or a hidden shelter. Caleb followed her glance. Nothing moved there except dust sliding from the bank. Still, his skin prickled. Nora had said to be careful after dark. Royce had posted lies before daylight. Hannah needed coffee for someone who drank it, someone she would not name, someone connected closely enough to missing cattle that Royce was poisoning the town before that person could speak. Hannah got the wagon up the bank and did not look back. At her gate, the nail still stuck in the post. She climbed down, tied the team, and stood with the folded paper in one hand and the coffee tin in the other. Then she looked across the basin toward Caleb. He was too far to read her face, but he saw the decision in her posture. She carried the salt to the shed first, the lamp oil to the porch second, and the coffee tin last. She did not take it into the kitchen. She walked past the house, past the cistern, and toward the narrow trail that dipped behind the cottonwoods and disappeared along the dry wash. Caleb sat motionless in the saddle until she vanished from sight. The town thought the coffee meant courtship. Royce wanted the coffee to mean shame. Nora had looked away as if the coffee meant danger. Hannah had said plainly that she did not drink it. So why did Hannah Vale need coffee if she did not drink it? Hannah kept to the narrow trail behind the cottonwoods until her house dropped from sight and the road noise faded into wind, Harness Creek, and the dry scrape of willow leaves. The coffee tin knocked against her skirt. She caught it against her hip and stood still long enough to hear whether any hoof had followed her. Nothing came from the gate. Nothing crossed the wash behind her. Still, she watched the mesquite line and the low ridge, because Royce Vale had taught Ruby Basin that a woman alone was easiest to watch when she believed nobody cared where she went. The hidden trail began where the dry wash bent below the Vale cottonwoods. Daniel had cut it years before to move a sick calf out of the sun without driving the herd across open ground. Hannah had used it twice since his death. Until 4 mornings ago, she had not thought of it as a road a frightened man might crawl along before daylight. The old Vale-lined shack stood less than a mile from her house, tucked near the south fence where the pasture narrowed against scrub and government land. It was 2 rooms of warped plank, a stone chimney, and a patched tin roof. From the road it looked abandoned. From the trail, smoke could betray it. No smoke showed now. Hannah stopped 50 yards short. A boot mark she had brushed over yesterday had been scuffed open again near the water barrel. Beside it lay a strip of rawhide cut clean through, dark at one end from old sweat. She bent, touched it, and felt every thought in her tighten. "Mr. Pike," she called softly. The shack did not answer. "Ezra, it is Hannah Vale. I brought what I promised." Something shifted inside, more like cloth sliding than a man rising. A cough followed, dry and small, the sound of a chest that had spent too many nights in cold air. "You alone?" Ezra Pike whispered from behind the door. "Yes." "Look again." Hannah turned in a full circle, searching the trail, the wash, the brush, and the ridge. Nothing moved except dust lifting from a rabbit hole. "I am alone." The door opened the width of her hand. Ezra's face appeared in the crack, gray under a wild beard, one eye yellowed from an old bruise, lips split white. He had been a night herder for half of Ruby Basin at one time or another, a narrow man with a bowed back and a memory for brands, bells, and men who lied over cattle. Now his hat hung too large on him, and fear seemed to have worn him thinner than hunger. "Coffee?" he asked. Hannah lifted the tin. "Enough for 3 mornings if you do not make it strong." He stared at it with a hunger that had nothing to do with pleasure. He was looking at heat, wakefulness, and one bitter thing strong enough to keep a shaking body upright. Ruby Basin had turned the coffee tin into gossip. Royce had turned it into shame. Ezra looked at it as if it might carry him alive to the hour when he could speak. "May I come in?" Hannah asked. Ezra looked past her once more, then backed away. The shack smelled of cold ash, damp wool, and sickness. Hannah's blanket lay dragged into the corner farthest from the cracked window. The cup she had brought yesterday was empty. So was the water jar. "You did not refill from the barrel," she said. Ryder came before dawn. "Royce." One of his, yellow mare, scar at the lip. "Keenan." "Maybe," he saw the door shut, "that may be enough." Hannah set the tin by the hearth and crouched without lighting a fire. Smoke might give Ezra away, but cold might kill him before Royce needed to do worse. His hands shook even when he pressed them hard against his knees. "Tell me again," she said. "Told you twice." "Tell me slower." "Slower gets a man dead." "Fast got you hiding under my blanket." His mouth tightened, but the anger failed from lack of strength. He tried to rise, and his knees gave before he had lifted from the floor. Hannah reached out and stopped short of touching him. "May I help you to the cot?" He stared at her hand as if it might become a trap. Then he nodded. She took his elbow and felt the tremor running through bone and sleeve. He weighed almost nothing. That frightened her more than the bruise. "You said you heard Juniper's bell," Hannah said. "You said Lost Bell Canyon." Ezra's eyes snapped to the window. "Do not say that loud." "No one is here." That is what men say before a rope falls. The word changed the room. "What rope?" Hannah asked. Ezra swallowed. Vale rope, your rope. The one Daniel kept on the west gate with red thread whipped near the end. I knew it because I spliced that thread myself after the winter freeze. Hannah saw the rope in her mind, looped on a peg beside the west gate, gone 2 mornings ago. She had told herself it was misplaced among too many chores. Who cut it? Royce's rider. You saw him. I heard Juniper first. At the bell cow's name, Hannah's breath caught. Ezra saw it and lowered his eyes. She still had the bell, she asked. Yes. Where? Lost Bell Canyon. The canyon lay south and west, where the old trail folded between dark rock shoulders. Daniel had said cattle disliked it unless pushed, because echoes made every sound feel like pursuit. How many heads? 4 by sight, more in the dark, maybe 6, could have been 7 if that calf bawling under the bank was yours. My missing 5 then. More than yours, maybe. Royce has been salting the canyon mouth, bringing small bunches through, mixing brands before daylight. He does not need to steal the whole basin. He only needs enough confusion that men ask him to sort it. Hannah crossed to the cracked window. Through the board gap she could see the south brush and the low roll of ridge beyond it. The notice, the coffee rumor, Nora's flinch, the store warning, the missing rope, and Royce's words at Bell's counter began to fit together too neatly to be mistake. Why did you run here? She asked. Daniel paid me fair once. Daniel has been dead 2 years. Dead men can still be the last decent account a man remembers. Ezra opened the tin and breathed the smell of coffee before he took any. His eyes closed for 1 second, and the hard shake in his hands eased only a little. Did Royce see you in the canyon? Not at first. I was looking for 2 Bell steers. Heard Juniper where no Vale cow ought to be. Crawled up the bank and saw Keenan at the lower gap with your rope through the gate ring. He cut the tail end off after it dragged over black rock. Why cut it? Fibers, sign, memory. Royce does not like loose things with memory. Royce was there. Above them on his bay. He told Keenan to move quick before daylight caught the bell. Then he said if that old fool Pike lived to round up, half the basin would know who opened the canyon. Hannah went cold. He named you. He did not need to. There are many fools, Mrs. Vale, not many old ones who sleep near cattle and ask questions for no wages. She took the water jar outside. Near the barrel, she saw a man at the edge of the cottonwoods and froze. Caleb Marlowe lifted both empty hands. His horse stood behind the willows, reins loose, stirrup turned inward so it would not knock the trunk. I stopped here, he said. I did not come farther. Why are you here? Royce's yellow mare rider took this trail after you left the store, then doubled back before the wash. I saw the tracks from my ridge. You followed me. I followed the sign, then I stopped because the trail is yours. She looked past him into the brush. Did anyone follow you? No. Certain enough to stop here, instead of riding in like a man trying to own the trouble. Behind her, Ezra coughed. Caleb heard it. His eyes moved to the shack and came back to Hannah without demanding an answer. She could send him away. Every instinct trained by widowhood, gossip, and Royce's pressure told her to keep the secret small. But Ezra could hardly hold a cup. Royce had already moved faster than one woman could answer alone. Caleb had bought salt without claiming her and had stopped at the edge of the trail instead of pushing through the door. If I let you come in, Hannah said, you do not speak over him, you do not grab at proof, you do not tell me what I ought to do before I finish hearing what he knows. If he asks you to leave, you leave, say it plain. Caleb met that without offense. I will come in only because you permit it. I will leave if either of you tells me to. I will not make your trouble mine in a way that steals it from you. Hannah held his gaze, then nodded once. No metal against the rail. Caleb tied his horse lower in the willows and came back carrying only his hat. Ezra saw him at the doorway and nearly dropped the coffee tin. No, Ezra rasped. No ranchers talk at troughs. Caleb stopped outside the threshold. I can go. Ezra looked at Hannah. You brought him. I allowed him, she said. There is a difference. Royce will wring it out of him. Hannah stepped between them before fear could turn into quarrel. Ezra, Caleb saw Keenan's sign. If he knows part, he may as well hear enough not to stumble into the rest. Ezra looked at the cold hearth. No smoke. No smoke, Hannah said. Then coffee cold, it will taste like mud. You need it hot. I need to live to round up. The room stilled. Caleb lowered his voice. What happens at roundup? Ezra looked to Hannah first. She nodded. Brands stand in daylight, Ezra said. Calves pair with cows. Men who lied in winter have to count under other eyes. If I stand close when Juniper comes through, I can say where I heard her bell and who cut Vale rope at Lost Bell Canyon. Who else knows the canyon? Caleb asked. Royce Keenan, maybe Nora Bell. Hannah looked up. Nora. Bell sent me looking for strays because Royce said Bell's 2 steers had crossed south. Nora was in the store yard when I took the order. Later, after the canyon, I hid behind Bell's shed before dawn. Nora found me and gave me a cloth, told me not to go inside because Royce was waiting with her father. Hannah remembered the flinch at the counter, the matches pushed across the ledger, the warning about crossing after dark. Nora had not stood publicly, but she had not been empty either. How long until roundup? Caleb asked. 10 days if weather holds, Hannah said. Ezra shook his head. Royce will force an early tally before then, buyer coming sooner. Merritt from Socorro Way. Royce sent a wire through the stage line. I saw the paper in Bell's back room when Nora opened the door. 3 days, maybe 4. Hannah felt the floor tilt. 3 days is not enough to gather my south pasture. It is enough for Royce to say you failed, Caleb said. Ezra pointed at him with one bent finger, and enough to buy your silence with pasture. Caleb's expression changed. What pasture? North of your lower fence, the grass strip Vale leased after Daniel died. Hannah turned. You use that strip. I pay Royce for access when the creek runs low. He can cut you off. If he wants my cattle thin before fall, yes. Ezra nodded hard. He said Marlowe would not bark once his own herd needed Vale grass, said a lonely man with debt learns manners. Caleb went quiet. His humor did not vanish in a show. It folded inward like a tool put away until it was needed. Who heard him say that? Caleb asked. Bell Keenan, another rider. I was under empty crates by Bell's shed. Caleb looked at Hannah. He did not ask whether she believed Ezra. She saw him count the price. Drought, hay short, hired men watching his lead and north pasture access in Royce's hand. You should not be in this room, she said. I know. Then why are you still here? Because if I leave and pretend I heard nothing, Royce keeps his pasture and I lose more than grass. Ezra made a small sound. Fine words feed nothing. No, Caleb said. Grass does. That is why I am thinking before I spend mine. She stirred coffee grounds into cold water and handed Ezra the cup. He grimaced at the taste and drank anyway, 2 shaking hands wrapped around the tin as if bitterness could argue him back into the world. You cannot stay here much longer, Caleb said. Hannah gave him a warning look. He lifted one hand. Not an order. Keenan has already ridden the trail. Where would he go? Hannah asked. Not my ranch yard if he fears ranchers. There is an old lime kiln above my east wash. Shade, water near enough, and no reason for Royce to check unless he knows. Moving him in daylight would show everything. Then not daylight. Nora said be careful after dark. Because after dark is when they expect you to move, Caleb said. That does not mean staying here is safer. Ezra clutched the cup. Royce does not need to kill me. He only needs me sick enough to sound drunk, scared enough to run, or missing long enough that your cattle become his confusion. The truth landed hard. Hannah looked at the coffee tin and understood the trap around it. Coffee kept Ezra awake. Coffee gave his old body something to grip until roundup, buyer day, or any public hour that could force Royce's work into daylight. Then we keep you alive and sober, Hannah said. Sober is easy, alive is dear. Dear things are still paid for. Ezra's eyes softened for the first time. Daniel talked like that when he was about to do something mule stubborn. Daniel is not here. No, you are. The words hurt and steadied her at once. Hannah put the matches in the dry box, the salt in a cracked bowl, and the rest of the coffee under a loose hearthstone where mice could not reach it. At the trail split, Caleb paused. Ezra, if Royce forces that early tally, will you stand? Ezra did not look up. If I am breathing. That is not the same as yes. It is the only yes I own. Outside, Hannah pointed Caleb toward the wash. Wait 10 minutes, then ride by your lower fence. If anyone asks, you were checking sign. I should have asked before following at all, Caleb said. Yes. Next time I will. Next time I may still say no. Then I will have my answer. By noon, Ruby Basin had grown hot enough to flatten sound. Hannah returned by the back trail, washed Ezra's cup at the pump, and hid it behind a loose board in the shed. She had just brought Caleb's torn feed sacks to the porch when Royce rode into her yard with Mr. Bell's delivery wagon behind him. The wagon was nearly empty, carrying only 2 flour sacks and a ledger box. Mr. Bell held the reins with both hands. Nora sat beside him, gloved fingers locked around each other. Keenan followed on the yellow mare and stopped near Hannah's west fence without dismounting. Hannah stepped off the porch. You brought a wagon to collect a debt that is not due. Royce smiled from the saddle. I brought witnesses to prevent misunderstanding. You brought a storekeeper you frightened and a rider who cuts rope. Keenan's head lifted. Nora's eyes flew to Hannah, then dropped. Royce's smile thinned, serious words without proof. Then you should be careful how near you stand to them. Mr. Bell opened the ledger box as if his fingers hurt. Mrs. Vale, Royce has asked that we settle accounts until the cattle question clears. Royce does not own your ledger. No, Royce said, but he understands risk. Bell cannot carry a woman whose herd may be under claim. Hannah looked at Mr. Bell. How much? Including last month, seed meal, lamp oil, flour, salt, and the quinine from spring. $11.40. The quinine was for Tom Baird. Caleb paid it. Nora whispered, it is marked paid. Mr. Bell turned a page too fast. Yes, marked paid, then $9.10. Royce shook his head with false patience. Numbers confuse under strain. Hannah took Daniel's old tally notebook from a nail box by the rail and opened to the back page. $7.62 as of Monday. Salt and lamp oil today were traded against mending for Caleb Marlowe. They do not belong on my ledger. Nora's lips parted. Mr. Bell looked down at his book. Royce leaned forward. That trade was convenience. Bell's store released goods. Bell's store may call the balance when risk rises. You have until Saturday noon to settle every cent in coin or saleable beef cleared by my count. The deadline struck harder than the notice because it carried a clock. Saturday noon. 3 days. Before Merritt could arrive, before Ezra could stand in roundup daylight, before Hannah could gather the south brush and prove where Juniper had been taken. Your count has no authority on my land, Hannah said. It will when your unpaid account touches public trade. You cannot starve my cattle through a store ledger. No one is starving anything. I am encouraging order. Royce looked toward the shed. Until Saturday, Bell will extend no flour, grain, lamp oil, coffee, salt, nails, wire, harness repair, or medicine to this place without coin. Hannah heard coffee and knew he had placed it there for her. Nora heard it too. Her eyes shone, but she stayed silent beside her father. Say it clean, Hannah said. You are cutting my supplies. I am protecting Ruby Basin from bad debt. And if I pay Saturday, then we inspect your herd. And if I refuse your inspection, then buyers will hear that Hannah Vale cannot prove a single beef she offers. Keenan shifted near the fence. His mare nosed the dust close to the faint trace Hannah had brushed over from Ezra's path. Hannah forced herself not to look toward the line shack trail. Royce followed her face anyway. Hot day for wandering. Then ride home. Mr. Bell flinched. Nora looked as if she might speak, but Royce turned his horse just enough to put himself between her and Hannah. "There is a kinder way," Royce said. "Sell me the questionable head now. I will credit your account, take the burden of dispute, and leave you enough to live quiet. No public tally. No buyer laughing at a widow's confusion. No neighbor dragged into your trouble because he pours coffee before sunrise." Hannah thought of Juniper's bell in Lost Bell Canyon, Ezra drinking cold coffee so his old body could last, and Caleb learning his pasture could be used as a bridle. "No." Royce's expression hardened. "Pride makes poor winter feed. So does theft." Mr. Bell sucked in a breath. Keenan's mare stamped. Nora gripped the wagon seat. Royce's voice dropped. "Saturday noon, Hannah, coin or cleared beef. After that, every account closes, and every man in this basin learns what it costs to tie his wagon to yours." He wheeled his horse without waiting for reply. Keenan followed. Mr. Bell turned the wagon clumsily, ashamed enough to fumble the reins but not brave enough to stop. Nora twisted once on the seat. Her eyes met Hannah's, full of fear, apology, and a question she did not yet have the strength to ask. When the wagon left, dust hung behind it like a curtain. Hannah stood until the road emptied. Then Alma Creed came from the far side of the wash, leading a dun pony with a folded shawl over one arm. Alma had been Daniel's mother's friend, a broad-shouldered widow with silver hair and a way of entering trouble as if common sense had invited her. "I waited until he left," Alma said. "You heard." "Enough. My nephew drives a freight wagon west tomorrow. He can take you to Magdalena, maybe farther if you sell the team. You have kin in Kansas." Hannah's tired anger rose. "You came to tell me to run." "I came to tell you there is a road before Royce blocks all of them." "That is running." "Sometimes running is living long enough to choose another fight." Hannah picked up Caleb's torn cinch cover from the porch table. The needle still hung in one edge. "If I leave," she said, "Royce takes the herd by calling it confusion. He takes Ezra by making him disappear into fever or fear. He takes Daniel Vale's name and pins theft to it so every man says Daniel left bad fences and bad records. Then Royce takes the land because no buyer will touch a widow's claim once the basin believes the stock was never clean." Alma's eyes narrowed. "Ezra." Hannah went still. "You said Ezra. You did not hear that. I heard enough to know you have more than cattle in hiding. Is he alive?" Hannah looked toward the cottonwoods. Alma exhaled. "Lord help us. He saw something. Against Royce." "Against Royce." Alma sat on the porch step. "Then the road out is still open, and you should take it twice as fast." "No." "No," the word was quieter this time and stronger. "I know the cost now. Heard Ezra Daniel's name land. If I go, I lose all four and live somewhere else with my body safe and every true thing buried under Royce's notice." "True things do not feed you either." "No, stolen cattle feed him." Alma looked at the west fence where Keenan had paused. "Can you prove it?" "Not yet." "Can Ezra? If he lives and stands." "That is a narrow bridge." "It is the only one not owned by Royce." Alma studied her face. "And Caleb Marlowe." Hannah picked up the cinch cover again, then noticed she had threaded the needle through the same hole twice. "Caleb knows enough to get hurt by it." "Did you tell him?" "I allowed him to hear some of it." "That sounds like you are measuring every inch between help and claim." "I have to." He asked before stepping in. It may cost him pasture. From the south pasture came the faint complaint of cattle wanting salt. Hannah heard it and felt the store deadline settle into her bones. Saturday noon, coin or cleared beef, supplies closed, buyer turned, witness hunted, proof still hidden in a canyon Royce controlled. Alma rose. "I can bring flour tonight, no wagon, just a sack over the pony." "Royce will know." "Royce knows I dislike him. Let him wear himself out counting old women." Hannah nodded because refusal would be vanity now. "Thank you." "Keep a lamp low tonight," Alma said. Men watching a dark house imagine too much and come closer. After Alma rode away, Hannah carried Salt to the trough and spread it with her bandaged fingers. Juniper was missing, so were the others. Across the wash, Caleb rode along his lower fence. He did not cross onto her land. He stopped where she could see him and lifted one hand. She lifted hers in answer, small and brief. It was not a rescue signal. It was acknowledgement that both of them now stood inside the same storm by choice. Farther south, dust rose near the road to Lost Bell Canyon. Hannah watched until it faded. Royce did not have to prove the herd was his before Saturday. He only had to close the store, frighten Ezra, pressure Caleb, and let every honest need on the Vale place turn into evidence against her. By sunset, Hannah understood the shape of the trap. Royce could starve her out before she could prove the herd theft. By late afternoon, the nail in Hannah Vale's gatepost had worked loose enough to shine. The torn place where Royce's notice had hung showed pale cedar under weathered gray. Hannah stood beside it with a hammer in one hand and Caleb Marlowe's coffee packet in the other. The packet should have gone straight to Ezra Pike before dusk, but a rider had been sitting in the mesquite since noon, close enough to watch her kitchen door. He wore the red and black hatband Royce's men favored, and he turned his horse whenever Hannah moved between house, barn, and corral. She drove the nail deeper instead of pulling it. The hammer blow rang through the dry evening. The rider lifted his head. Hannah struck once more because Royce had used that post for shame before sunrise, and she wanted the gate to answer. Behind her, the kitchen door stood open. Caleb's torn feed sacks lay half-mended on the table. The salt sat near the stove, and the lamp oil had been set high on a shelf. Coffee meant Ezra. Salt meant cattle. Oil meant night work. The blocked place on the south road worried her more than the rider. She had found it after dinner when she checked whether a wagon could reach the line shack after dark. A dead cottonwood limb had been dragged across the shallow cut near the wash. Chain marks scraped the bark, and the dirt held boot prints. Hannah had moved what she could, but the thick end remained wedged between stones. A wagon could not pass without breaking a wheel. A saddle horse could go around through brush, but not without tracks. Royce was making every decent errand look secret. Hooves sounded on the north road. Caleb rode down from his place at an easy pace, a canvas tool roll tied behind his saddle. He stopped on his own side of the gate and waited until Hannah looked at him. "Mrs. Vale," he said, "I came for those ruined sacks before Tom Baird decides I have taken up fine sewing. They are not finished. Then Tom will survive another day with ugly feed sacks." Hannah studied him through the rails. He had not dismounted. His horse flicked an ear toward the mesquite, and Caleb's eyes moved there once before returning to her. "You saw him," she said. "The rider and the south road," Caleb said. "That cottonwood did not drag itself. If you need it cleared, I brought a saw." Hannah's fingers tightened around the coffee packet. "You guessed I would need to go south. Nora told you to be careful after dark. Royce pointed a rider toward your brush. You need coffee you do not drink. I can count 3 without owning the sum." The answer should have eased her. Instead, it tightened her chest. Caleb was seeing too much, but he was still beyond the gate as if the cedar rails mattered. Hannah looked at the kitchen, the barn, the rider, and the pale ruts of the road. "Come to the kitchen threshold," she said. Caleb dismounted slowly and looped his reins on the outside hitch post. He opened the gate only as far as needed, stepped through, and closed it behind him. The rider in the mesquite turned his horse broadside. Caleb did not look at him this time. Hannah walked ahead and stopped inside the kitchen, leaving Caleb on the porch. The worn plank threshold lay between them like a line neither had the right to ignore. "You can stand there," she said. Caleb stopped with one boot on the porch and one hand against the doorframe. He saw the sacks, the salt, the lamp oil, the empty coffee tin, and the folded scrap of Royce's notice. Then his eyes settled again on Hannah. "I am not asking to come in," he said. "Good. I am asking what help means tonight." Outside, the rider's horse snorted. Hannah put the coffee packet on the table and untied the string. "You said at Bell's that nobody owns anybody," she said. "I meant it." Men say generous things when a store is listening. They do. She poured the coffee into her own tin. The ground struck the metal with a dry hiss. If you clear that road, folks will say I could not. Yes. If you ride south with me, Royce will say you followed me to prove his gossip. If you ride ahead, Ezra may run because he sees another man before he sees me. Likely. Caleb's expression tightened at the name, but he did not interrupt. And if you do nothing, Hannah continued, Royce keeps the road, the rider keeps the watch, and an old man who knows where my cattle went sits in a shack with no coffee and too much fear. At the mesquite, the rider nudged his horse 2 steps forward, then stopped. Caleb kept his hands still. Then tell me where the help ends, he said. Hannah closed the coffee tin. That is my question. Caleb looked down at the threshold. When he spoke, his voice carried no public wit. It sounded like a man measuring a board before cutting. If I help you, Hannah, does it steal your choice? Her breath caught because he used her name quietly. The softness sharpened everything outside. The rider, the blocked road, the nail in the gate, Nora's ledger, and the daylight sliding toward danger. It might, she said. Caleb nodded once, then test me. Hannah came to the threshold but did not cross it. Close enough, she could see the dust on his coat and the scratch along his knuckle. You will not ride in front of me. You will not speak to Ezra unless I ask you. You will not pay Belle's account in secret. You will not tell Ruby Basin I am under your protection. No, I will not, and I would rather choke on Belle's bad crackers. The answer slipped out dry and plain, and Hannah almost smiled before the rider's horse stamped hard enough to strike stone. Caleb's gaze flicked outside, then back. If I tell you to turn back, you turn back, she said, even if you think I am wrong. I can say I think you are wrong, then I turn back if you still tell me. She held his eyes. She did not need a silent hired hand wearing courtship clothes. She needed a man who could disagree without taking the reins. If I ask you to clear the road and stay behind, you do that. Yes. If I ask you to ride close because I am afraid, you do not make a claim out of it tomorrow. The words cost her. She had not meant to admit fear, but the darkening window and the blocked road had stripped pride down to use. Caleb's face softened, yet he did not step over the threshold. No, he said, fear is not a promise owed to the man who hears it. For a moment the kitchen held still. Outside, the rider's silhouette sat black against the last bright strip of western sky. Caleb remained on the porch side of the threshold, and Hannah remained inside her own kitchen with the coffee tin in her hand. If this quiet trust between Hannah and Caleb matters to you, subscribe and stay with their fight through Ruby Basin. Hannah set the tin in a saddle pouch and crossed the threshold first, shoulder brushing Caleb's sleeve by her choice. He stepped back to give her room. It did not make the road safe. It made the danger honest. Take the saw, she said, clear only enough for a saddle horse. Not a wagon. A wagon leaves too wide a story in the dirt. And after, wait by the wash bend where the bank hides you. If I wave my hat once, you ride home. If I wave twice, come close but do not speak unless I do. Understood. Caleb turned toward his horse. The rider in the mesquite straightened. Hannah went to the barn and saddled her mare herself. In the corral, Juniper, her red brindle bell cow, watched while 3 calves nosed along the fence behind her. One calf bawled toward the south pasture. Another answered from beyond the cottonwoods. The sound was faint, not where it should have been. Hannah counted the visible calves twice and found one missing from the bunch near Juniper. Caleb, she called. He had mounted but not moved. Yes. Did you see cattle moving on the south flat? Dust only, too low for a wagon. Royce's men. Could be. The rider in the mesquite wheeled and vanished through the brush at a trot. Hannah swung into the saddle. He is going to tell them. Then we are late. No, Hannah said, turning her mare toward the blocked road. Then we are expected. They rode separately as planned, Hannah first by a full 100 yards, Caleb behind and slightly north. At the south cut, The cottonwood limb still blocked the wagon way. Caleb dismounted only after she passed him the saw. He cut one branch and dragged brush aside while Hannah watched the ridge, the wash, and the old trail. Each pull of the saw sounded too loud. Twice Hannah lifted her hand and Caleb stopped at once. Once a quail burst from scrub and sent her mare sideways. Caleb did not reach for the bridle. He waited while Hannah settled the animal with knee and voice, then bent back to the branch. When the path was wide enough for one horse, Hannah pointed to the bend. Caleb tied the cut limb against a mesquite trunk so it looked wind-thrown instead of newly cleared. Then he led his horse down into the shadow of the wash bank and disappeared from the road. Hannah rode on alone. The line shack sat in a fold of land where cottonwoods grew thin and old. Hannah approached from the west, whistled 2 notes, and waited until Ezra Pike's face appeared in the narrow gap between 2 boards. He looked smaller than he had 2 mornings earlier, with gray whiskers bristling and fear bright in his eyes. "Mrs. Vale," he whispered, "you brought no one." "No one to the door. A man waits where I told him unless I call." "Marlowe," Ezra said, "Royce will say you set a trap." "Royce says many things before breakfast." Hannah carried the coffee tin inside but did not light the stove. Smoke would show. When she mentioned Nora's warning, Ezra flinched and said Royce watched everybody who owed him. "Does Belle owe him?" "Belle's ledger does. Royce bought notes quiet last winter after that bad freight run. Nora keeps the book so she knows whose name is tied." "Will Nora testify?" Hannah asked. Ezra shook his head. "Not while her father can lose the store." "Will you?" His hands trembled so badly his hat brim folded. "I saw your bell cow driven through Lost Bell Canyon. I saw Royce's boys smear fresh mud over brands until night covered them. I saw enough to die for, Mrs. Vale." Outside, a calf bawled, much closer than before. Hannah moved to the door. Ezra caught her sleeve, then released it at once when he saw her look down at his hand. "Sorry," he whispered. She listened. Another calf answered from the direction of her hay rack, a frantic high bawl that did not belong to normal evening hunger. Then came the crack of wood. Hannah grabbed the coffee tin and left the shack before Ezra could speak again. She mounted from the low stump and rode hard enough that branches slapped her skirt. At the wash bend, Caleb came out of shadow with his horse already turned. "Calves," she said. He did not ask for more. Hannah pointed once toward her place. Caleb fell in behind her, close enough now to hear and far enough to keep her line open. They cleared the cottonwood cut and climbed the south rise just as a dull orange lick showed behind her barn. It was not the barn. Hannah saw that in the next second and forced air into her lungs. The hay rack near the lower corral had caught at one end, more smoke than flame, but dry hay burns greedier than pride. 2 men were riding away from it, driving a scatter of calves toward the ditch that led to Royce's leased pasture. One rider swung a rope wide to push the animals, not catch them. The point was confusion, risk, and panic. Hannah did not ride toward the burning rack first. "Calves," she shouted. Caleb heard the order inside the word. He turned his horse to the outside flank but held back from taking the lead. Hannah drove straight for the white-faced calf from Juniper's pen, which was stumbling toward a wire gap near the wash. If it tangled there, the rest might pile after it. Smoke crawled low across the flat. Juniper bellowed from the corral, bell clanging as she shoved against the rails. Hannah leaned over her mare's neck and called the calf Button because of the dark spot under its jaw. The calf veered at her voice, then panicked at Caleb's horse on the flank. "Wide," Hannah called. Caleb pulled wider without argument, opening space instead of closing it. The calf skidded, found the gap between them, and bolted toward the corral gate. Hannah swung down before her mare fully stopped, flung the gate open, and slapped the rail twice. Juniper's bell gave one hard note, and the calf ran toward it. A second calf had gone toward the hay rack, blinded by smoke and heard fear. Hannah coughed once, wrapped her sleeve over her mouth, and ran on foot. Caleb started to dismount nearer the rack. "Water trough," she shouted. He changed direction at once. He dragged the trough hose loose and opened the spigot while Hannah got behind the calf. Heat brushed her face, but the damage was still small enough to fight if the hay was pulled away. The rider from the mesquite reappeared near the ridge, saw Caleb at the water, and wheeled back out of sight. Hannah clapped her hands low and spoke steady. Come on, little fool, not there." The calf stumbled away from the smoke. Caleb soaked a blanket from the rail and threw it over the burning end of the rack, smothering more smoke than flame. A board cracked under the heat and dropped. Sparks jumped into the dirt. He stomped them out and went back for another bucket. Hannah drove the calf through the gate herself. The third calf came with it, bawling and wild-eyed. She slammed the gate and dropped the bar. Juniper shoved her muzzle against both calves, breathing them in, bells settling into a dull tremble. Only then did Hannah turn to the hay rack. Caleb had dragged the unburned hay clear and was throwing dirt over the blackened corner. The rack had lost 2 side slats and 1 wheel brace. It would not roll loaded now. The loss was not grand enough for town sympathy and not small enough for winter. "Enough water," Hannah said, coughing. "Save the barrel." Caleb stopped. His shirt sleeve was scorched brown near the cuff, but his skin showed no burn. He stepped back from the rack and waited for her to judge it. Hannah walked around the damage. She touched the cracked brace, the wet blanket, and the dragged mark where the men had moved the rack closer to the hay stack. Had she gone south by wagon, the barn might have caught before she returned. "They wanted me south," she said. "They wanted the calves loose first. They wanted you seen near my place when smoke rose." Caleb looked toward the road. 2 silhouettes had already appeared at the far bend, one of the milk goat boys and the widow from the north ridge in her buckboard. Smoke pulled people faster than church bells in Ruby Basin. "Then I should go," Caleb said. Hannah's head turned. "If I stay," he said, "Royce will use me." The words were right. The timing cut. Hannah looked at the calves, the damaged rack, the road, the missing rider, and the coffee tin tied to her saddle. "No," she said. Caleb went still. "You will stand by the trough," she said. "When they come, you will say you brought water because I told you to. You will say nothing about Ezra or the South Road unless I ask. You will not explain my choices for me." "All right." "And you will not leave me alone with a burned rack and 3 witnesses who arrived after the smoke." The courtship between them became visible in the plainest possible way then. Caleb stayed exactly where Hannah placed him while the road began to fill. The widow pulled her buckboard near the gate. The milk goat boy rode up behind her. Mr. Bell's hired clerk came next on a mule, then 2 ranch hands from the east pasture. Hannah opened the gate herself. "The calves are safe," she said before anyone asked. "Saw smoke," the widow said. "Thought it was your barn." "It was meant to look that way from the road." The boy craned his neck. "Who done it?" 2 riders moved calves and damaged the rack. One watched from the mesquite earlier. The clerk swallowed. "Royce." "I am saying what I saw." Caleb kept silent by the trough, wet sleeves hanging from his forearms. The widow looked at him, waiting for the man to take over. He did not. She looked back at Hannah. "You see their faces?" the widow asked. "Not clear enough for a court, clear enough for my fences." One east pasture hand shifted. Royce had men moving cattle tonight, said he was gathering strays before weather turned. Hannah looked at the empty sky. "There is no weather." "Dust coming from Lost Bell Way," he said, then regretted it. Caleb's hand tightened on the bucket handle. Hannah saw it and gave him a small shake of her head. "Not yet." Hooves clattered on the road. Nora Bell rode in on an old store mare, her skirt dark with dust and her face pale under her hat. She stopped outside the gate, saw the rack, and covered her mouth. Mr. Bell was not with her. "I came when I saw smoke," Nora said. "Did Royce send you?" Hannah asked. Nora flinched in front of everyone, and the publicness of that flinch changed the yard. "No," Nora said. "I came because of the ledger." The word landed hard. Caleb remained at the trough. Hannah stepped closer to the gate but did not open it wider. "Privately?" Hannah asked. Nora's eyes filled. "Please." Hannah let her in and walked her to the side of the barn, where the others could see them, but not hear every word. Nora held a folded page against her bodice. Pa's store notes are in Royce's pocket, enough that he can call the freight debt and take the back lot. Pa said no more credit until your cattle matter clears. You knew this morning. I found the transfer paper after you left. Royce made Pa copy a false balance in the ledger, making your account look worse than it is. Hannah looked past her to the yard, where the widow had begun inspecting the dragged marks by the rack without touching them. Will you say that out there? Nora's face broke. Not tonight. The refusal came small, but it came clean. Nora had ridden here alone while Royce's men still moved in the dark. She had also stopped short of the public truth. Why? Because if I say it before witnesses and Pa denies it, Royce will take the store by Friday. If Pa admits it, he loses every account from folks who think the book is crooked. Royce is taking my cattle tonight. I know. Nora wiped her cheek with the back of her wrist. I saw 2 of his men enter a count near Lost Bell Canyon after supper, 8 head marked as recovered strays. She pushed the folded page toward Hannah. Hannah did not take it at once. If I hold that, you cannot pretend you did nothing. I do not want to pretend. Nora's voice dropped. I am afraid. From the yard came Juniper's low bellow and the scrape of Caleb setting the bucket down. The cattle were being shifted while Nora gathered courage by inches. The hay rack smoked behind them. The gate nail still shone. Hannah took the paper. One day, Hannah said. Nora nodded too fast. Not because I owe you patience, because a true ledger may count more than a scared word tonight. Thank you. Do not thank me, bring proof. Nora looked toward Caleb. Royce says Mr. Marlowe is the reason you fight. Hannah folded the ledger copy and put it in her skirt pocket with the torn notice. Royce says whatever makes a woman smaller. Are you courting him? The question had no gossip in it now. It carried warning. Hannah glanced toward the trough. Caleb stood where she had placed him, letting smoke dry on his sleeves while half the yard measured his nearness. He asked whether helping me stole my choice, Hannah said. Nora looked startled. That is not how most men ask. No. Then be careful. Royce hates a thing he cannot name and own. Hannah led Nora back to the gate before anyone could pretend they had not been watching. The widow's lantern had been lit. Its small flame made the yard look more public, not less. The east pasture hand shifted again. Mrs. Vale, he said. Royce's bunch moved 6, maybe 8 through the lower trail after dark. I did not see brands. Did you see direction? Lost Bell. The name tightened Nora's mouth. The clerk heard it and stared toward the dark basin as if the canyon might answer. Caleb looked at Hannah, waiting. Hannah did not speak Ezra's name. She did not wave Caleb forward. She walked to Juniper's pen and counted the calves with her hand on each small back, button, red socks, split ear. Then she counted the hay loss, the broken brace, the witnesses, the ledger copy, and the road Royce had tried to close. Tonight, she said, I keep these calves in this place from burning. At first light, I ride Lost Bell. The widow nodded. I can watch your kitchen smoke from my ridge. Watch the south road instead, Hannah said. The boy with the milk goats lifted his chin. I can tell Ma about the shirts. Tell her tomorrow. Tonight tell her if she sees riders with no lantern, she should shut the shutters and remember the direction. The boy nodded. The east pasture hand looked toward Caleb. Marlowe, you riding with her at first light. Caleb did not answer for Hannah. He looked at her. Hannah met the waiting faces. Mr. Marlowe will ride where I ask him. That answer put their courtship in the open without handing anyone ownership of it. The widow's brows lifted. Nora looked down, then back up with hope and fear braided together. Far south, beyond the wash and the blocked road, cattle bawled in scattered waves, too many throats for Hannah's yard and too distant for Royce's home pasture. Juniper raised her head and answered. The bell at her neck sounded once, then again, steady as a summons. Hannah turned toward the sound. Caleb stepped off the trough plank but stopped when she lifted one hand. Stay, she said. He stayed. She walked to the gate alone and looked into the dark where her stolen herd was moving. Behind her stood a man whose restraint had become visible enough for Ruby Basin to talk about by breakfast. Beside the barn waited an ally who had brought a torn piece of truth but not yet the courage to hold it up. In the South, Royce had begun burning the things that kept animals alive. Hannah gripped the top rail until the cedar pressed hard into her palm. Her calves were safe for one night. Her hay rack was damaged. Her road had been blocked. Her store account was trapped inside Royce's ledger. Her witness still hid. Her romance was no longer private. Beyond Lost Bell Canyon, Royce Vale was moving her cattle because he now knew she would not leave Ruby Basin quietly. Merritt reached Ruby Basin a little after noon with dust on his hat, 2 tally men behind his buckboard, and a red account book strapped under the seat. The buyer did not stop at Bell's store for shade or talk. He drove straight along the stage road toward the South Pens, where Royce Vale had gathered cattle in full view of town. That choice pulled people after him. A blacksmith left a shoe cooling in the slack tub. Mrs. Carver stepped out of the store with flour still unpaid for under one arm. 2 boys climbed onto the porch rail until old Mr. Bell told them down. Nora Bell stayed in the doorway with a ledger hugged to her waist, watching the road as if she already knew the day had narrowed to one place. Royce had prepared the pens like a courthouse that answered only to him. His riders held the gates. His tally man stood on a barrel with a board and pencil. Mud streaked several flanks where brands should have shown clean, and the cattle bunched tight enough that a person had to wait for the right turn to read a hide. Hannah Vale came on foot from the dry wash trail. Her skirt hem was dusty, and rawhide bound the wrist brush had torn that morning. Caleb Marlowe rode 30 yards behind her and dismounted at the far rail, keeping distance enough that no one could claim he had brought her there. Royce saw them arrive together anyway. "Widow travels with an escort now," he said. Hannah put both hands on the top rail and looked into the pen. "I came for my cattle." Royce gave the crowd a weary smile. "You hear how it begins. Mr. Merritt came for a clean sale, and Hannah brings accusation before the count has started." Merritt climbed down from the buckboard and struck his hat against his thigh. He had the hard face of a man who had bought from honest ranchers and liars in equal measure. "I was promised clean brands and clean count." "You will have both," Royce said, "if family confusion stays out of business." "My cattle are short," Hannah said. "Your notice went up before daylight before you washed one brand." Royce spread his hands toward her, not angry yet, only sorrowful enough for an audience. "She is worn down, Mr. Merritt. Alone too long, poor fences, poor sleep. Grief can make a woman desperate to blame somebody." The words moved through the watchers. Some looked at Hannah with pity, which stung worse than dislike because pity could bury a woman while calling itself kindness. Caleb stepped beside the rail, but Hannah did not look at him. If she leaned on his anger, Royce would use it. Merritt opened his account book. "Here is my rule. Sunset is my line. At sunset I either take cattle whose brands I can read and whose count I trust, or I drive on at first light and buy elsewhere. I will not carry a basin quarrel to market." Royce nodded as if the deadline helped him. "Fair." Hannah pointed through the rails at a steer crowded behind a dun cow. "White notch in the left ear, scald mark above the hock, veil fork on the right flank. That one is mine." Royce looked too quickly. "No, that is the mistake I warned about." "Turn him." The rider at the head rope glanced at Royce instead of moving. Merritt noticed, "Turn him." The steer swung sideways, and mud covered the flank in a thick brown handprint. Hannah heard the crowd shift. Mud happened in corrals, but this mud sat where a man would put it if he wanted to hide iron. "Wash it," she said. Royce's smile thinned. "We do not need to scrub every animal because Hannah imagines theft." Merritt closed the red book halfway. "I said clean brands, wash it." A bucket came from the trough. Water struck the steer and ran down in muddy ropes. The brand beneath did not show clean, but one prong of an old Vale fork appeared under the smear. Caleb leaned forward. "That hide has been worked over," he said. Royce turned on him. "Careful, Marlowe. I am looking at a brand." "You are looking where a woman asks you to look, because coffee visits have softened your judgment." A few men laughed before they saw Caleb's face. Hannah kept her grip on the rail. She would not let Royce turn a damaged brand into a courtship joke. Caleb said, "Mrs. Vale has not asked me to speak for her." "Then why are you here?" "Because Merritt buys from me next week. If Ruby Basin sends a dirty count today, every honest ranch tied to this road pays for it." Tom Baird, Caleb's hired man, stood near the feed wagon with 3 Marlowe riders. At Caleb's answer, Tom looked down. Len Price folded his arms and stared toward the North Hills. Royce followed that look and saw the opening. "Since Mr. Marlowe has made himself judge of my pens," Royce said, "he should know I will not renew his north pasture passage across Vale land while he insults my gather. His yearlings can stay off the spring lane by sundown." Tom's head snapped up. The north pasture passage was Caleb's drought margin. Without that lane, his cattle had to trail miles around dry country to reach water, losing flesh and taking extra hands to hold. Every rider there knew what Royce had just taken. "Boss," Tom said, "we need that spring lane." Caleb's eyes stayed on the muddy steer. "I know." "Then do not spend it on another outfit's quarrel." Hannah looked at Caleb. "Do not answer that for me." "I am answering for a clean market," Caleb said. "Your men will pay." "Yes." The plainness of it made the cost worse. Tom turned away from the rail. Len followed him halfway to the horses, then stopped, waiting to see whether Caleb would retreat. He did not. Royce lifted his voice again. "Set that animal aside. We will not let a widow's nerves spoil the rest." "Every muddy flank gets washed before it is counted," Hannah said. Merritt nodded. "That stands." Royce's tally man marked the disputed steer with a chalk slash and pushed the count forward. More buckets came. 2 Arbar beeves passed clean. A third showed a blur that could be called old damage by a man who wanted money more than truth. The crowd pressed closer to the rails. Public pressure rose not in one shout but in tired calculations. Feed bills, store accounts, freight due, winter salt, the buyer's wagon sitting under the sun. From the store porch, Nora watched Royce more than the cattle. When his far rider shifted toward the road, she flinched. Hannah saw it and turned. At the edge of town, Ezra Pike had appeared with a bedroll over one shoulder and Caleb's old coffee packet clutched against his chest. He was not coming to the pens. He was cutting across the road toward the North Trail, limping fast, head down, trying to vanish while every eye in Ruby Basin was fixed elsewhere. Royce saw him too. Satisfaction crossed his face before he hid it. "There is her witness," he called, "a worn-out night herder sneaking off with coffee." Heads turned. Ezra looked up, saw the crowd, and froze. "Ezra," Hannah called. He flinched, then ran. He did not run well. His left knee buckled in a rut and the bedroll slipped down his arm. Royce's far rider swung toward his horse. Caleb stepped from the rail. Hannah caught Caleb's sleeve. "No. Royce's man will reach him. If you chase him, Ezra will think another man is closing a circle." She released Caleb and ran herself. Dust climbed around her boots. Someone near the road laughed because Royce had made the old herder look like another piece of Hannah's desperation. Hannah did not slow until Ezra stumbled against a cottonwood and dropped the bedroll. The coffee packet split on a stone, spilling dark grounds into pale sand. "Leave me be," Ezra cried. "I will go north. I will not say anything." Hannah stopped several paces away and held both hands open. "I am not bringing you to Royce. He said he would put me where nobody would find me." The road went quiet. Royce laughed too quickly. "Listen to him, wild talk from an old man she has hidden and fed." Ezra pressed his back to the tree. "I will not say Lost Bell again, I swear it." The name traveled through the watchers. Old men remembered Lost Bell Canyon as former Vale Range before a flood cut the easy trail. Younger men looked toward the southwest ridge, measuring what they had never bothered to ask. "Ezra," Hannah said, "look at me." His eyes found hers. "Did Royce move my cattle through Lost Bell Canyon?" Ezra's mouth opened. No sound came. Royce stepped closer. "Do not answer that," Royce said. Merritt looked at him. "Why not?" "Because she is leading him. First secret coffee, then store accusations, now canyon tales. Mr. Merritt, you can see what this is. Hannah kept her attention on Ezra. She needed his words. Sunset was now a hard wall in her mind, but his hands shook so badly that the torn coffee cloth fluttered between his fingers, and Royce's rider waited only a few yards away. "If you cannot speak here, you do not speak here," Hannah said. "You come to my porch or Belle's porch where people can see you. I will not trade your safety for my name." Ezra stared at her as if he had not expected Mercy to survive the count. Nora stepped off the store porch with a cup of water. Her father called her name, but she kept walking and gave the cup to Hannah so Hannah could offer it first. Royce pointed toward them. Convenient. When the old fool cannot answer, she hides him behind kindness. "He is not evidence to be spent," Hannah said. That sentence changed some faces along the road. Mrs. Carver lowered her flour sack. The blacksmith looked from Ezra to Royce with new attention. It did not prove anything, but it made Royce work harder. He pulled a folded paper from his coat and handed it to Merritt. "My morning tally, signed before this performance began. 42 Arbar beeves fit for sale. 7 family-marked strays held aside until ownership clears. No Vale Fork cattle taken from Hannah's range." Merritt unfolded the paper. Hannah stepped back toward the pens. "You staged that before the buyer arrived." "I counted what stood in my gather." "You covered brands with mud." "Dust happens where cattle stand." "You worked at least one hide." Royce softened his voice for the crowd. "Hannah, listen to yourself. You see tricks in mud, threats in riders, stolen cattle behind every hill. You need rest before you ruin more than your own sale." The word rest landed like a door closing. Several watchers looked away from Hannah because it was easier to pity her than to oppose Royce. Merritt held the false tally against his red book and checked the sun. "Sunset remains the line," he said, "but I still require readable brands." "Then read them," Royce said. "Do not let her dispute every animal until daylight dies." He signaled his tally man. The next string moved through the narrow lane faster than before. Muddy flanks flashed and vanished. The tally man called numbers in a clipped voice that made speed sound like order. 31. 32. "Hold the red steer," Hannah said. No one held it. Caleb reached the lane gate and swung it shut before the next animal passed. The steer struck the rail with its shoulder and bawled. Royce came at him. "Open that gate. Turn the red steer back. This is not your count. It is Merritt's count, and he asked for clean brands." Merritt stepped to the lane. "Turn it." Joss Harlan hesitated until Royce gave a short nod. The red steer came around, and water from the last bucket had cut a streak through the mud. The lower prong of a Vale fork showed beneath a fresh, dark rub. Mrs. Carver gasped. The blacksmith leaned over the rail. "That hide has been touched." Royce snapped old mark. "That steer is 4 years old," Hannah said. "He was branded on my place after Abram died. I wrote him in my ledger." Royce's eyes sharpened, then fetched the ledger. The trap opened under her. The ledger was at home on the kitchen shelf. If she left, Ezra stood exposed. If Caleb sent a man, the Marlowe crew had to choose publicly whether Hannah's proof mattered more than their water lane. Caleb turned. "Tom, ride to Mrs. Vale's and bring the ledger." Tom did not move. "Boss." "Top shelf if she tells you where." Tom's face went red. "If I ride for her paper while Royce closes the North Passage, Len and me are finished at Marlowe's. I am saying it plain." The words struck the dust in front of everyone. Caleb's own hired man had made the crack visible. Caleb looked at Len. Len did not deny it. "Then you are finished," Caleb said. Tom stripped off his gloves and threw them down. Len walked with him toward the horses. 2 younger hands stayed near the feed wagon but would not meet Caleb's eyes. Royce let the silence stretch because it showed more damage than any insult. Caleb had lost not only a pasture lane but the confidence of men whose wages depended on his judgment. Hannah wanted to tell him to take it back. The urge rose hard enough to hurt. Then the red steer moved against the rail and the altered fork flashed once more. Ezra sat shaking on the store step. The ledger mattered, but the old man had gripped her sleeve when she moved. "I can go," Hannah said. Ezra caught her wrist. "Do not leave me." Royce smiled. Hannah looked at the road to her house, then at Ezra's hand. Royce had built the choice neatly. Save her public name and leave a frightened witness within reach, or protect the witness and let the paper stay miles away. She knelt in the dust so Ezra did not have to look up through shame. "I will not leave you with him." "Then he wins." "Not yet." She stood and faced the porch. "Nora, can your father spare the delivery boy?" Mr. Bell answered from the doorway, "No." Nora turned, "Pa. This is not our fight." Hannah nodded once, accepting the refusal without wasting breath on it. Nora came down the steps anyway, pale but moving. "I will ride." Royce stepped between her and the road. "You will stay out of Vale business." Nora faltered. Her courage did not disappear, but it bent under years of store accounts, family fear, and Royce's hand on half the basin's trade. She looked at Hannah with apology in her eyes. Caleb picked up Tom's discarded gloves and tucked them under his belt. "I will go." Royce laughed. "Your hired men have more sense. They have made their choice. And you have made yours. North Passage closed. 2 hands gone, all for a woman who will not even let you claim the rescue." Caleb mounted. "That is the first true thing you have said. She will not." Before he could turn, Joss Harlan rode across the lane mouth to block him. Merritt's voice cut through the heat. "Let him pass." Joss looked at Royce. Royce said nothing. For 3 breaths, the whole road watched buyer money press against Royce's control. Then Joss moved aside by inches. Caleb leaned from the saddle. "Where is the ledger?" "Kitchen shelf," Hannah said. "Behind the blue plate in a brown book with a cracked spine." "Anything else?" She looked toward the southwest ridge. "If you see fresh tracks behind my cottonwoods, do not follow them alone. Come back." He understood the thing she did not say. A ledger could name animals, but it could not prove the route. Ezra could name Lost Bell Canyon, but Royce had already taught people to doubt him. Mud, lampblack, and an altered brand could force suspicion, not verdict. Caleb rode hard toward the dry wash. Dust closed behind him. Royce turned back to the pens. "While Marlowe plays errand boy, we continue." "We continue washing," Merritt said. Royce's patience broke. "You have held men, cattle, and money half a day over a widow's nerves and an old man's muttering." "And over altered hide," Merritt answered. The blacksmith lifted his chin. "I saw that burn line." "You saw what she told you to see." Mrs. Carver spoke before fear could stop her. "I saw it before she said a word." That small contradiction did not free Hannah, but it cracked the public quiet. Royce looked from face to face and found too many people thinking instead of waiting. "Bring the next string," he ordered. Joss and another rider pushed cattle through slowly now because Merritt stood beside the lane himself. 3 Arbar beeves passed clean. One had no readable mark and was set aside. Another carried an old Vale fork blurred by a fresh dark rubbing near the lower prong. Hannah counted under her breath. 1, 2. "Aside is not return," Royce said. "Aside is not sale," Hannah answered. The sun slid lower. The rails threw longer shadows. Men who had laughed at noon now spoke in tight whispers, each disputed animal burning more daylight and more money. Store credit waited on cattle money. Freight waited on cattle money. Royce's false tally lay inside Merritt's book like a nail half driven. Nora stood near Ezra on the porch, placing herself between him and Royce's rider whenever the man shifted. Her father watched through the store window, his face gray with the cost of his daughter's choice. The pressure reached the store before it reached the sky. A freighter asked Mr. Bell whether flour orders would be held if Merritt drove on. Mr. Bell did not answer. A woman who owed for calico folded the cloth back onto the counter and walked outside empty-handed. One of Royce's riders told the boys at the rail that Hannah was costing every family in Ruby Basin supper money, and the boys repeated it until Mrs. Carver snapped that children should not carry a grown man's lie in their mouths. Hannah heard the words and kept counting. She had learned that a public lie did not need everyone to believe it. It needed enough tired people to wish the accused would stop making trouble. Every washed flank now carried 2 weights, the mark burned into hide, and the cost people feared if the count failed. Royce moved among those fears like a man checking fence posts. He spoke quietly to the freighter. He touched Mr. Bell's shoulder at the store door. He told Joss Harlan to keep the cattle ready so no one could accuse him of delay. Each small action made him look patient, useful, almost injured by the fuss around him. Then Ezra stood suddenly. His cup fell and darkened the dust. "I know what he will do," he said. Every head near the porch turned. Ezra stared toward the southwest ridge. "If the count is not clean, he sells the clean ones first. The others go through Lost Bell after dark. He said no one looks twice at a disputed cow once money changes hands." Royce's mouth went white. "Old man." Ezra recoiled. Hannah stepped between them. "Enough." Merritt looked toward the ridge. "Is there a pass there?" No one answered quickly. The blacksmith scratched his jaw. "Old gate, maybe, washed out after the big flood. If somebody cleared brush, cattle could pass." Hannah felt the answer strike like a bell. Physical proof had to be there. Fresh-cut brush, dragged boards, hoof marks in the old wash, a strip of wire, a rub of Juniper's bell strap, something the whole basin could see. Without it, Royce would fold Ezra's fear into his story of instability and let Sunset finish the work. Royce recovered first. "Then let her find this magic gate. She has until sunset, does she not?" Merritt checked the sky. "Less than 2 hours." One of Merritt's tally men closed the gate on the next steer and waited with his pencil lifted. No one told him to mark the number. Even the hired men who wanted the sale understood that the count had stopped belonging to Royce alone. Royce turned to the crowd with open hands. "Fair as any man can make it. If Hannah brings hard proof from Lost Bell before sunset, I answer it. If not, my clean count stands and Merritt buys." Hannah knew he would never offer the chance unless he believed the proof was guarded or hidden well. Joss Harlan sat too still near the lane. 2 Royce riders who had been at the far fence were gone. The road to Lost Bell would not be empty. A horse came fast from the southwest ridge, not toward Royce's house but straight to the pens. The rider slowed when Royce lifted one finger. Creek mud marked the horse's legs, and the man's right spur strap hung torn and wet. The old seep near Lost Bell was the only wet ground in that direction. Hannah saw it, Merritt saw her see it, Royce saw both of them. "Where have you been, Wade?" Merritt asked. The rider looked to Royce. "Checking fence," Royce said. "Which fence?" Hannah asked. Wade said nothing. The sun lowered bright and pitiless over the ridge. Caleb was still gone for the ledger. Tom and Len were gone with their saddles. Ezra could hardly stand. Nora had courage without authority. Merritt had suspicion without proof. Royce had a signed tally, cattle in the pens, men near the canyon road, and a deadline that would turn doubt into sale. Hannah placed Ezra's trembling hand in Nora's and looked toward Lost Bell Canyon. If Ezra had told true, there had to be one hard mark left in the dirt, wood, wire, or hide. If she could not put that proof in Merritt's hands before the light died, Royce Vale would win the count. By the time the sun leaned west, the dry wash had stopped looking like a boundary and started looking like a road someone had been using against her. Hannah Vale stood at the bend below Lost Bell Canyon with dust on her skirt, a strip of torn hide in her hand, and every sound in Ruby Basin carrying too clearly across the heat. Behind her, at the rise near the cottonwoods, cattle buyer Silas Merritt waited with his tally book half open. Nora Bell stood beside his wagon, pale and rigid, as if one wrong breath might call Royce's eye back to her. Ezra Pike crouched in the shadow of the wash bank with Caleb Marlowe's hat pulled low over his face, shaking so hard the brim trembled. Hannah did not look first at Royce. She looked at the ground. The old cow path that had once wound around the wash had been dressed over with brush, but no one could hide the story of cattle from a woman who had lived by their marks for 9 years. Hooves had cut deep into the clay where the bank narrowed, not scattered tracks, not strays milling after a broken fence. The marks ran single file toward the canyon mouth and came back lighter, as if cattle had been driven through in haste and pushed up the far side before they could spread. She knelt and touched one sharp crescent with 2 fingers. The edge crumbled under her nail, fresh. The wind had not softened it. A dragged branch lay beside the trail, its leaves browned at the tips, the underside scraped raw where someone had used it to blur the path. Hannah lifted it, turned it, and saw a strand of hair caught near a thorn, red roan hair, juniper's color. Caleb came down the bank behind her but stopped 3 paces away. His gelding blew uneasily at the smell beyond the brush, and one of Royce's riders shifted in his saddle. "Mrs. Vale," Merritt called from above, impatient now because daylight was money to him. "If there is proof, I need it before I write the purchase off." Hannah did not answer yet. She rose, walked 20 steps along the wall of the wash, and found the second sign where the canyon stone leaned inward. A rope end hung from a splintered cedar root. At first glance it looked like any old tie left from some shepherd's use, but Hannah knew the twist. Vale rope, bought cheap from a Santa Fe freighter 2 springs back, stiff with a green thread laid into the hemp. Royce had mocked her for buying her own coil when Daniel's old gear still hung in the shed. Then 3 lengths had vanished from her tack room after Daniel's burial, and Royce had told her grief made women mislay ordinary things. The rope was frayed clean across, not rotted, cut and torn under strain. She pinched the end and let the fibers separate in her hand. A fresh smear of dark hair clung where the loop had rubbed hard against a board. "That is mine," she said. Royce laughed from the ridge. He sat his bay near the narrow approach, flanked by 2 men who looked less certain than they had that morning. A widow finds a scrap in a canyon and calls it a deed. Hannah turned only enough for the watchers to hear her. Not a deed, a gate tie. That word changed the air. Merritt lowered his pencil. Nora lifted her head. "There is no gate in Lost Bell," Royce said. Hannah looked toward the canyon mouth. A screen of old boards stood where sunshot mesquite crowded the wall. Royce had laid brush across it, enough to fool a rider passing high on the ridge. From below, the boards showed their seams. One plank carried a scrape at the height of a cow's horn. Another had fresh nail shine near the hinge. Hannah walked toward it. "Hold there," Royce snapped. Caleb moved then, not past Hannah, but sideways into the wash where Royce's horse would have to descend if he meant to reach her. Caleb's face had gone quiet in the way that made men stop joking around him. "Let her look. You do not give orders on Vale ground." "I am standing in the wash." "You are standing in trouble." "That part has been plain since breakfast." Merritt closed his book with one finger still marking the page. "Mr. Vale, if there is a gate behind that brush, I mean to see it." Royce swung his gaze to the buyer. "You came to count beeves, not be led through widow tricks." "I came to buy clean cattle. Tricks are exactly what I avoid." Hannah reached the boards and set both hands against them. Dust shook loose from the top plank. The wood did not give, but it answered with a hollow creak. Behind it came a sound so small that for a moment only Hannah heard it, one dull note, iron against iron. She froze. The bell sounded again. Nora's hands flew to her mouth. Ezra whispered, "Lord help us." Hannah pressed her ear nearer the crack between 2 boards. The bell came a 3rd time, louder, followed by a low bawl that rose and broke against the canyon walls. Hannah knew that voice better than any man's argument in Ruby Basin. Juniper had bawled at feed troughs and storm gates until the whole Vale place had learned to answer her. "Juniper," Hannah called. Behind the boards, something struck hard. The bell clanged wild now, not the lazy sound of a grazing cow, but the sharp, urgent knocking of an animal that had heard home. Dust puffed through the cracks. Hooves scrambled. Another cow bawled behind her, then 2 more. Hidden cattle shifted in a tight place, and the canyon gave the sound back until even the men on the ridge could not pretend they had heard nothing. Merritt's face changed. He opened his tally book again. Royce jerked his bay a step forward. "Do not touch that gate." Hannah looked over her shoulder. "You said there was no gate." The words landed clean. No one laughed. Even Royce's riders stared at the boards now, and one took off his hat as if the heat had suddenly thickened. Royce pointed at Ezra. That old fool has been feeding lies. He moved them himself and now means to sell you a story for protection. Ezra shrank back, but Hannah did not. Ezra did not cut my rope. Ezra did not hang my boards in your canyon. Ezra did not put Juniper behind them. My canyon. You just claimed it. Royce's mouth tightened. For the first time that day, he had answered too quickly in front of witnesses. Nora heard it. Merritt heard it. The riders heard it, and one of them looked away from Royce toward the trail out. Hannah turned back to the gate. It was fastened from the outside by a crossbar wedged through 2 iron brackets. Royce had set it high enough that a tired man would need a shoulder and both hands, but Hannah had lifted hay frames heavier than that alone. She tested the bar. It stuck, swollen from old weather and jammed by hurried hands. Caleb took 1 step toward her. No, she said without looking at him. He stopped. Royce heard the refusal and smiled. There is your independence, Marlowe. She cannot move a barn board but will ruin 3 families, proving a cow can ring a bell. Hannah braced 1 boot against the lower plank. Her injured fingers screamed when she gripped the bar. She shifted to her palms, pushed up, then rocked the wood hard in its brackets. The first pull did nothing. The second sent a line of dust down her sleeve. Behind the gate, Juniper bawled again, and cattle slammed away from the boards in a heavy wave. Easy, Juniper, Hannah called through the crack. Easy now, I hear you. The bell answered, 1 wild iron note. Nora stepped off the rise and started down the bank. Royce, stop this. Royce swung in the saddle. Get back by the wagon. Nora stopped, but she did not retreat. Every eye moved to her. She looked as though the whole morning had been gathering in her chest and had finally become too large to hide. You told Pa it was an old sheep pen, she said. Royce's face went flat. You are confused. You told me not to come past the wash because Mrs. Vale was setting traps. Nora. Her name cracked like a rain. She flinched, and the flinch exposed more than any speech could have. Merritt looked from Nora to Royce, then wrote something in his book. Royce saw the pencil move. That was when he stopped trying to deny and chose damage. He wheeled his horse downhill, shouting to the 2 riders. Open the brush line, drive them out south. If she wants a show, give her one. Scatter every hoof before Merritt counts a stolen mark. 1 rider obeyed from fear before sense could catch him. He spurred toward the side trail that wrapped above the boards, where another opening must have been hidden. The second rider hesitated long enough for Caleb to see the choice forming. Caleb seized his horse's reins and stepped into the narrow throat of the wash. Merritt, keep your wagon back. Nora, stay clear of the bank. Ezra, do not run. Royce bore down toward him. Move, Marlowe. No. Merritt does not buy from men who interfere with another rancher's herd. Caleb's jaw tightened. Then he will not buy from me today. Merritt looked sharply at him. Caleb had put his own fall on the ground where everyone could see it. The buyer's contract for Caleb's late-season steers had been the one thing keeping Marlowe feed paid through drought. Royce raised his voice so the riders could hear. You hear him. He throws his own sale away for her. Caleb held the wash. I throw it away before I let you stampede boxed cattle through people. The first rider reached the upper brush and hacked at a hidden latch. Boards rattled behind the screen. The cattle inside surged toward the new sound, confused between Hannah's voice and the stranger's noise. Juniper's bell clanged hard enough to make the wood tremble. Hannah drove her shoulder under the crossbar and lifted. Pain shot down her arm. The bar rose an inch, dropped, and tore skin from the heel of her hand. She did not step away. She spat dust from her mouth, shifted her grip, and shoved again, using her hip this time, forcing the swollen wood to grind against iron. Juniper, she called, come to me, come Vale. The bell stopped for 1 breath. Then Juniper answered with a long, deep bawl that rolled through the gate like a memory of every evening feed call Hannah had ever given. Ezra crawled up from the bank despite Caleb's warning. She knows you, he said, voice ragged. Mrs. Vale, she knows you. Royce saw Ezra standing and lunged for him instead of Caleb. He drove his bay sideways, reaching down to grab the old man's collar. You filthy liar! You will not say another word." Caleb abandoned the straight line of the wash and caught Royce's bridle just below the bit. The horse tossed, nearly knocking Caleb under its shoulder. He held long enough for Ezra to stumble back. Royce swung a fist down. Caleb took the blow on his forearm and slammed against the bank, boots sliding in loose gravel. Nora screamed his name, then stopped herself with both hands over her mouth. Hannah heard the strike but did not turn from the bar. If she left the gate now, Royce would win by making her choose panic over proof. Caleb had stepped into danger to keep the throat open. That was his choice. Hers was the gate. She set her bandaged fingers around the bar one last time. "Juniper, hold." The cow behind the boards quieted as if the command had reached her. Hannah drew in one breath, bent her knees, and lifted with everything the last months had not taken from her. The bar jumped clear of the first bracket. She shoved left before it could fall back. Wood screamed on iron. The far end broke loose, swung down, and struck the ground at her feet. The gate sagged inward. Hannah stepped aside, caught the edge, and hauled it open herself. Sunlight spilled through the crack onto red hides, white faces, and the bright iron bell under Juniper's throat. The bell cow stood pressed at the front, dust on her muzzle, one horn scraped pale from pushing boards, Hannah's brand plain on her left hip. For a heartbeat, no one made a sound. The wash held still. Merritt stopped writing. Royce's horse stopped fighting the bridle. Even the cattle behind Juniper seemed to wait. Hannah lifted both hands and called in the voice she used from her porch at dusk. "Juniper, come home." The bell cow stepped through. The bell rang once, clear and steady. Behind her came the first Vale steer, then another, then 3 cows bunched shoulder to shoulder. They did not run wild into Royce's trap. They pushed toward Hannah's voice, angling down the open throat of the wash instead of the upper brush where Royce's rider shouted uselessly. Hannah walked backward, palms out, calling each name she knew. Juniper followed, and the herd followed Juniper. "Merritt," Hannah said without taking her eyes off the cattle, "count them as they pass." Merritt opened his book with hands that no longer looked bored. 1 bell cow Vale brand, 1 red steer, 2, 3, black-faced cow Vale brand, 4. Royce tore free of Caleb and shouted up the canyon. "Drive them south, cut them off before they bunch." The second rider, the one who had hesitated, looked at the cattle, then at Hannah, then at Royce. He did not move. "I pay you," Royce barked. "You paid me to watch road," the rider said. His voice was low, but the wash carried it. "Not steal from a widow in front of a buyer." That sentence struck harder than a shot would have. The first rider at the upper brush stopped hacking. He looked down and saw every face turned toward him. His hand fell from the latch. Merritt continued, each number digging Royce deeper. 5, 6, calf Vale notch, 7, red roan heifer Vale brand, 8. Ezra stepped into the open, trembling but upright. "There were 11 last night," he said. Royce spun toward him. "Shut your mouth." Ezra flinched, yet he stayed where the buyer could see him. 11 when they pushed me past the line shack. Royce had them fed poor, kept them tight, said if I spoke, he would swear I drove them myself. Hannah's voice cut through the old man's fear before Royce could. "Ezra, stand by Merritt. Let him see your face." Ezra obeyed because Hannah told him to, not because Caleb pulled him or Nora pleaded. He climbed the bank, one hand against the clay, and stood beside the buyer's wagon. Merritt looked at the old man's torn cuff, the dust ground into his knees, and the fear still working in his jaw. 9, Merritt said, 10. The last animal hung back behind the gate, bawling toward the upper brush. A calf, separated from its dam by the crowded opening, skidded sideways and knocked against the splintered plank. Royce seized the moment. "There," he shouted. "She is breaking them herself. A bad gate, a bad hand, a wild herd. Merritt, you cannot buy under this confusion." Hannah moved before anyone else could. She slipped past Juniper's shoulder, keeping her body low and her voice steady, and crossed the dusty gap between the cow and the calf. The calf shied. Juniper swung her head, bell ringing quick. Hannah put one hand against the bell cow's neck. "Easy, Juniper, let him come." Juniper settled. The calf nosed forward, found the opening, and stumbled through into the wash. Hannah turned him with her skirt and voice, not a rope, not a man's hand. The dam bawled from the herd line and the calf ran to her. Merritt's pencil moved. 11. Silence followed the number. It was not the soft silence of people thinking. It was the hard silence after a false wall falls down. Ruby Basin stood exposed around the wash, Merritt with his pencil in the air, Nora with tears bright on her face, Ezra shaking in the sun, Caleb holding his bruised arm against his ribs, two hired riders refusing to meet Royce's eyes, and Royce caught between denial and the cattle walking out of his secret gate. Nora came down the bank slowly. Dust marked the hem of her dress. Her father was not there to hide behind, and Royce had no store counter to place between them. She stopped beside Merritt's wagon and faced Hannah first. "I saw the rope in his barn," Nora said. "The green thread. He told me it was from your place because you owed him for supplies after Daniel died." Royce's voice dropped. "Nora, think about your father." She turned toward him, and whatever fear remained in her did not stop the words. I am thinking about the account book you made him mark, the notice you had him leave on Mrs. Vale's credit, and how many women you have kept quiet by making their bread depend on your temper." The writers stared at her now. Merritt wrote again. Caleb looked at Hannah instead of Nora, because Hannah was still among the cattle, still keeping Juniper from swinging the herd too fast toward the open road. Royce dismounted. That was the most dangerous thing he could have done, because on foot he looked less like a rancher and more like a man cornered. He walked toward Merritt's book. "Give me that tally," he said. Merritt stepped back. "No. You are recording contested cattle." "I am recording cattle coming through a hidden gate you said did not exist." Royce grabbed for the book. Caleb moved despite the pain in his arm and put himself between them. Royce shoved him hard enough that Caleb hit the wagon wheel and nearly went down. The buyer's team stamped. Juniper jerked at the sound, and the herd bunched again. "Caleb," Hannah called, not for rescue but warning. He caught the wagon's side with his good hand and stayed upright. "Keep counting, Merritt." Royce lifted a loose board from the gate frame, raising it high enough to scatter the cattle if he struck the planks or the ground. "I said there will be no count." Hannah stepped into his path. She had dust across her cheek and blood showing through the torn bandage on her hand. Juniper stood behind her with the bell still moving faintly, each dull note reminding every listener what had answered her. Hannah did not reach for the board. She did not ask Caleb to take it. She stood close enough that Royce would have to strike past her in full sight of everyone to destroy what she had opened. "Put it down," she said. Royce's face twisted. "You think a cowbell makes you safe?" "No, I think every person here just watched you lie. They watched a performance. They watched Juniper come when I called. They watched my brand come through your boards. They watched your rider refuse your order. They watched Nora stop hiding for you. They watched Merritt change his count." Merritt spoke from behind Caleb. "And I have written 11 Vale cattle recovered from the concealed Lost Bell Gate." Royce looked at the buyer as if the pencil itself had struck him. "You will never buy in this basin again if you write that." "Then Ruby Basin is smaller than I was told." The second rider backed his horse away from Royce. The first rider came down from the upper brush with both hands visible and his eyes on the ground. "Mr. Vale," he said, "I am done with this." "You are done when I say." "No," the man's voice shook, but he repeated it. "No." That one word moved through the wash like wind before a storm. The people at the ridge heard it. One of the boys from morning had followed at a distance and stood now beside the widow's buckboard, eyes wide. The freighter was there too, his hat pushed back, no laugh left in him. Public opinion did not turn kindly all at once. It turned awkwardly, with shame, calculation, and fear dragging behind it. But it turned. Nora stepped closer to Hannah, though not so close as to take the center from her. "Royce, Pa will open the ledger tonight. I will open it if he will not." Royce lowered the board a few inches. "You will ruin him." "You used him." "I protected him." "You owned him." Hannah heard the pain in Nora's voice, but she did not let it soften the moment into forgiveness before the cost had landed. "Merritt, is the count changed?" Merritt looked down at his book. "It is changed. Your short herd is no longer short by those 11. Royce Vale's claim against your sale does not stand on this count." The words did not settle the whole war. They did not reopen Hannah's credit, repair her burned hay, or make Ezra safe through the night. But they broke the lock in front of witnesses. Royce knew it. His hand tightened on the board until his knuckles whitened. For a moment Hannah thought he would swing it into the gate, not at her, but at the evidence, at the visible thing he could still damage. Caleb shifted beside the wagon, ready to take the blow if it came, but Hannah lifted one bloodied hand and gave Juniper's bell strap a sharp tug. The bell rang clean across the wash. Every face turned back to the cow. Hannah used that turn. She reached behind Royce, caught the loose board with her uninjured hand and pulled it down out of his grip before anger could decide for him. The board hit the sand. She set her boot on it. "This stays," she said. "The gate stays open until every man who spread your notice sees where my cattle were." Royce stared at her, breathing hard. He still had land, money, and frightened people tangled in his name. He still had a store account to threaten and riders who might remember fear after sundown. He was not finished, but the wash no longer belonged to his version of the day. Merritt tore a small page from his book, wrote 3 lines, and handed it to Hannah. "Temporary count correction, signed by me. I will sign a fuller statement when we reach town." Hannah took it with her torn hand and did not wince where anyone could see. Caleb's eyes moved to the blood on the paper, then away. He had learned the shape of help by now. Hold the road, pay the cost, let her stand. Ezra came down beside Juniper and touched the bell with 2 trembling fingers. "I thought she would not hear you through the boards." Hannah looked at the open canyon gate, at the hoof cuts, the frayed veil rope, the moved cattle path, and the herd breathing in the sun behind her. Royce counted on that. She folded Merritt's note and tucked it into her pocket. Then she turned toward the ridge where the watchers waited, and where Royce's notice had already begun to die in their faces. "Bring the wagons down," she called. "Bring anyone who read that paper this morning." No one moved at first. Then the widow climbed from her buckboard. The freighter followed. The boy who had laughed at the coffee tin took off his hat and came down the bank as if every step cost him more than pride. Royce backed toward his horse, dangerous and angry, but no longer able to command the silence around him. Juniper's bell rang once more as the cow lowered her head to nose Hannah's sleeve. Hannah set her hand on the cow's neck and kept her eyes on the open gate. Royce's control had cracked in public. It had not yet fallen. But for the first time since the notice struck her post before dawn, Ruby Basin could see the crack widening. The herd came through the dry wash gate in a dusty line, and Ruby Basin fell so quiet that Juniper's bell sounded like iron struck inside a church. The bell cow stopped with her head over the Vale Road, breathing hard, while the missing steers crowded behind her. 3 showed Hannah's V clear on the hip. 1 carried a smear of mud and ash where a mark had been rubbed over in haste. A calf bawled against its mother's flank, and Ezra Pike held the top rail with both hands, pale from fear but standing where everyone could see him. Royce Vale sat on his horse beyond the gate, his reins drawn tight enough to make the bit ring. Dust streaked his coat. 1 sleeve hung torn from the scramble when Juniper had broken past his riders at Hannah's call. Cheney and Moss, the 2 men who had helped him hold the canyon mouth, had drifted 3 horse lengths behind him. That distance spoke before either man did. Hannah stood at the latch with the gate rope in her gloved hand. Her skirt was gray with wash sand. 1 braid had slipped loose, and a splinter of cedar had torn the cuff at her wrist. She looked neither triumphant nor rescued. She looked busy with the work left to do. "Close the wing panel," she said. Tom Baird moved first, though he was Caleb Marlowe's man. He glanced at Caleb from habit, caught himself, then looked back to Hannah. "Mrs. Vale." "Close it before the calves turn." Tom dropped from the saddle and swung the side panel shut. 2 men who had stood with Royce during the false count stepped in to help him. The chain rang into place. Royce lifted his head as if the sound had struck him across the mouth. "No man here closes my gate," he said. Nobody answered. "Cheney," Royce snapped, "open it." Cheney did not touch his rope. He stared at the ash-smeared steer, then at Ezra. The old night herder lifted a shaking finger. You held the lantern, Ezra said. You held it while Moss rubbed the ash. Cheney swallowed. I never changed a brand. You held the lantern. Moss turned in the saddle. Keep your tongue still, old man. Merritt, the cattle buyer, stepped between them with his tally book open. His collar had come loose, and the pencil in his hand was broken short. No one still's a witness now. I have altered marks, hidden cattle, and a seller pressing me to sign before the truth reached daylight. Royce swung toward him. You came to buy beef, not judge neighbors. I came to buy beef clean enough to ship, Merritt said. The contract is void. The word took the strength out of Royce's posture. All week he had spoken of the buyer as proof that Hannah was ruined and he was rising. Now Merritt stood in the road in front of the storekeeper, the freighter, the goat boys, the women from town, Caleb's crew, and the men Royce had hired, and removed the one thing Royce had meant to turn into money. You cannot void a handshake after I brought cattle, Royce said. You brought another owner's cattle under a false count, Merritt said. Mrs. Vale's bell cow answered her from ground you claimed held no Vale stock. I will not put my name to theft. Juniper shook her head. The bell clanked again. A boy on the bank let out a small laugh, then clapped both hands over his mouth. His mother hushed him, but the laugh had already crossed the wash. Royce was no longer large enough to silence cattle, children, and evidence all at once. Moss, Royce said, take the south bunch back to my lot. Moss looked at the steers, then at Merritt's book. Those 3 carry her mark. I pay you. You owe me 2 months. The sentence opened a new wound in front of everybody. A freighter leaned toward another man and muttered. Royce's face darkened. You want wages, you do as I say. Moss let his reins lie slack. I want wages from a man who can still sell cattle. Cheney pulled off his hat and wiped dust from his forehead. I am done writing this count, Royce. You are done when I loose you. No, Cheney looked surprised by his own answer, then steadied himself. I was hired to gather, not stand between a widow and her brand while Ezra Pike names me in the road. Royce rode 2 paces toward him. Caleb's gelding lifted its head from the lower bank and several men stiffened. Hannah raised one hand without looking at Caleb. He stopped where he was. So did Tom. So did the others who had begun to think that helping meant stepping in front of her. Leave my cattle where they stand, Hannah said. Your cattle, Royce laughed thinly. You could not hold Daniel while he lived, and you cannot hold his name now. The words hit the crowd with a different sound. Gossip had been cheap. Speaking of a dead husband as property to be seized was not. Mrs. Trask looked down. Mr. Bell removed his hat and held it against his stomach. Hannah placed one hand on Juniper's neck. Daniel Vale signed the lower place to me before he died. You know it because you carried the papers to town when fever kept him from riding. A widow remembers what comforts her. Merritt, Hannah said, still watching Royce. Read what I gave you. Merritt unfolded the packet she had pressed into his hand before the gate work began. Deed transfer for the lower Vale place, witnessed by Samuel Bell and Deputy Anson Wicks, September 3, 1882. Livestock schedule attached by brand and count. Ownership to Hannah Vale, not subject to Royce Vale or collateral family claim. The language was dry, but it stripped the family rope from Royce's hand. He had used the Vale name as if it were a hitch around Hannah's porch. Now the hitch lay in the dust where every neighbor could see it had never held. Bell witnessed that, the freighter asked. Old Mr. Bell stood near his wagon, gray-faced. Nora Bell stood behind him with the store ledger pressed against her ribs. Bell looked at Royce, then at Hannah. I did, he said. Royce turned. Stay out of this, Samuel. Bell's mouth opened, but Nora moved before he found the courage for more. She came down the bank into the wash, her blue hem catching on rabbit brush and tearing as she pulled free. Every eye followed her, because every person there knew Bell's store lived on accounts, freight favor, and the kind of silence that kept powerful customers pleased. Royce told us not to extend Hannah's account, Nora said. Royce's voice dropped. Miss Bell. Nora stopped 3 steps from Hannah, her fingers bent around the ledger cover. He said her herd was unsound. He said she was taking goods she could not pay for. He said if Pa let her buy salt, oil, or coffee, the Vale trade would move to Mercer Springs. That is store business. It became public business when you made me stand behind the counter while you turned her coffee tin into shame. Mrs. Trask drew her shawl tight. A teamster near the road muttered that Belle's ledger would be hard to trust if it bent that easily. Nora heard him. Her face tightened, but she did not step back. The correction cost her before it helped Hannah. She was naming her father's fear, the store's weakness, and her own part in front of the customers who would decide whether Belle's survived winter. "You hear her?" Royce said. "She admits Belle's handled the ledger. If fault sits anywhere, it sits behind that counter." Nora opened the book. The pages shook hard enough to flutter. "Here is your mark beside it." Merritt stepped close. Caleb came as far as Hannah's shoulder and stopped there. On the page, under Nora's smaller writing, stood Royce's initials beside the line freezing Hannah's account until the herd dispute cleared. Below it, in Royce's heavier hand, were 3 words, "Family claim pending." "Turn the page," Hannah said. Nora did. 2 sacks coffee charged to Royce Vale, 1 sack oats, kerosene, nails, rope, posted against Hannah Vale's unsettled cattle. The boy who had laughed at Juniper stared at Royce. Mr. Bell closed his eyes. The freighter said, "He bought on her name after shutting her out." "He said it would be made right when the family matter cleared," Nora whispered. Royce leaned from the saddle. "You will not work another day behind that counter if you finish this." Nora looked toward her father. Bell stood with his hat crushed in both hands, afraid of lost trade and ashamed of the fear. Hannah watched Nora weigh the account, the winter freight, the town's judgment, and the job she might lose in her own father's store. Nora lifted the ledger higher. "Royce told Pa that if Belle's backed Hannah, his riders would buy flour, salt, coffee, and tack from Mercer Springs. He told me to keep quiet when Ezra Pike came to the back door asking for Hannah, because no one would believe an old night herder over a widow who crossed the wash before dawn." Ezra tightened his grip on the rail. "I asked for Mrs. Vale because Daniel once pulled me out from under a storm at Hatch Mesa. I knew whose bell I heard in Lost Bell Canyon." "And I shut the door," Nora said. Tears came, but she did not use them to soften the words. "I shut it because Royce was in the front room and Pa was afraid." The crowd waited for Hannah to forgive her, as if forgiveness would make the hearing easier to stand. Hannah did not give them that comfort. "You could have come sooner," Hannah said. "Yes." "Ezra spent nights afraid because you did not." "Yes." "My cattle went without salt because you helped close the account." "Yes." "Then stay here while Merritt writes it. Do not step back now that it hurts." Nora nodded. She stayed in the dust with the ledger open while Merritt set his book against a saddle and wrote her statement beneath the cattle count. The pencil scratched loud in the quiet. Royce searched the bank for a face that still belonged to him. "Samuel, call your daughter off." Bell swallowed. "Nora keeps the ledger cleaner than I do. If she says the page needs reading, it needs reading." "You are choosing her over my trade." "I am choosing to know what sits in my own book." "You will feel that by winter." "Maybe," Bell said, "but I already felt this morning." The store backing did not leave Royce in one grand blow. It broke by pieces. Bell refusing to hide, Nora showing the page, customers hearing how credit had been used as a whip, and Royce's own purchases moved out from under Hannah's name. Merritt turned to the contract sheet, drew a firm line through Royce Vale, and wrote Hannah Vale under recovered owner and seller of record. He sanded the ink, then held the book open long enough for the nearest men to read it. "Write the brands under my name," Hannah said. "I have," Merritt answered. "Recovered Vale-branded cattle recorded to Hannah Vale. Witnesses Ezra Pike, Nora Bell, Thomas Baird, Samuel Bell, and myself." Royce made a low sound and drove his horse forward. Hannah walked into the road before Caleb or Tom could move. "You will not sell my bloodline from under me," Royce said. "Your bloodline did not mend my fences," Hannah said. "It did not sit with Daniel when fever took his lungs. It did not pull calves in sleet, pay taxes from egg money, or carry coffee to Ezra while you kept him thirsty and afraid. You have no family claim on my place." Hoofbeats rose from the upper road. Sheriff Anson Wicks came over the ridge with dust on his vest and his badge dull in the sun. He pulled up at the sight of the open gate, the recovered cattle, the gathered witnesses, and Royce alone in the road. "What happened here?" Wicks asked. The question arrived too late to lead the day. Merritt stepped to him with the book. "Sheriff, I have a voided buyer contract, visible altered marks, witness statements, and a recovered herd recorded under Hannah Vale. The cattle answered through that gate before you reached us." Wicks looked at Hannah, Mrs. Vale. "Ezra can tell you where they were held," she said. "Nora can tell you how Royce used the store. Merritt has the count. Juniper has already told the part a cow can tell." A few people breathed out a strained laugh, not mocking now. Wicks removed his hat and turned to Ezra. Ezra sat on the lower rail because his legs were failing him. Hannah crossed to him before anyone could make him into a spectacle. She set a hand under his elbow and said, low and plain, "Sit if you need to. Keep your words your own." He nodded. He told Wicks about the bell in Lost Bell Canyon. The cattle moved after moonrise, the ash rubbed over Mark's, the back door at Bell's, and the coffee Hannah brought because his hands shook too badly in the mornings. He named what he saw. He named where he hid. He named the fear without asking it to excuse him. The sheriff listened until Ezra finished, then faced Royce. "Hand me your sidearm and step down." Royce stared at him. "You have no charge." "I have enough to keep you from riding over witnesses while I sort the rest. Step down." Royce looked to Cheney. The rider looked back once, then turned his horse toward the far side of the wash. Moss followed him. They stopped there, not gone, but no longer Royce's men. Royce stepped down. No one cheered. The silence left every small loss audible. The creak of his saddle, the stamp of Juniper's hoof, the sheriff's hand closing around his weapon belt, Merritt's pencil moving again, Nora's ledger shutting on the page he had marked. Buyer contract, rider obedience, store backing, and family claim had all left him in daylight. When Wicks led Royce toward the upper road, Royce stopped before Nora. "You will regret this." Nora held the ledger against her chest. "I already did." Wicks moved him on. The crowd remained because shame made people slow. Some wanted to apologize to Hannah, but none had a clean sentence ready. Hannah gave them work instead. She turned to the freighter. "You read Royce's notice aloud at my gate." He rubbed his jaw. "I did. Tomorrow you will haul salt to my place at store rate, not charity. You will unload it where I mark and take a receipt signed by me." "Yes, ma'am." She turned to Tom. "I need a rider for 3 weeks, maybe longer if the south fence takes more work than I think. Fair pay. Bunk in the line shed after Ezra is finished with it. Orders come from me." Tom looked at Caleb again, then caught himself. Caleb lifted his hands from the reins. "Mrs. Vale asked you." Tom faced Hannah. "Then yes, ma'am, 3 weeks to start. Bring your bedroll after supper. We ride the canyon at first light with Merritt's witness men. No shortcut through Royce's north draw. I want every head counted where daylight can reach it." Ezra raised his head from the rail. "I can show the bend where they kept the dun steer." "Tomorrow you can show it from a wagon seat if you choose," Hannah said. "Today you are eating." "I am not useless." "I did not say you were. I said you are eating." Ezra looked at her, then at the line shack beyond the cottonwoods. "Beans. Beans, bread, and coffee if you can stand the taste." "I can stand coffee better than hiding." Hannah nodded and let that be enough. Nora came forward with a small iron key on a string. "The back coffee room," she said. "Pa kept the spare by the flour bin. Royce used that room twice to speak where customers could not hear. Ezra came there once and I shut him out. If you send for coffee again, I want you to know who opens the door." Hannah looked at the key. The offer was not grace. It was a repair with splinters in it. The account. Nora looked at her father. Bell nodded, small and late but real. "Open under Hannah Vale," Nora said. "No family hold. No private mark from Royce. Anything bought against your name requires your written order or your spoken word at the counter." "And Royce's charges?" Move to Royce Vale until the sheriff or court says otherwise. Say it where they can hear. Nora turned to the bank. Belle's store recognizes Hannah Vale's account as her own. The charges Royce Vale made against her name are struck from her ledger and placed to his. We will not hold her salt, oil, coffee, nails, or feed on his word. Mrs. Trask sniffed. That may cost Belle's the Vale trade. Nora's mouth tightened. Then Belle's will sell clean goods to smaller houses until trust grows back. The sentence cost her again. Hannah saw it land on Belle's face, on the teamster's doubtful stare, on Nora's torn hem and shaking hands. Nora had corrected the lie, but correction did not refill a till or mend a reputation by magic. Hannah took the key. Bring your ledger to my porch this evening. I will sign for the salt I need and the coffee Ezra drank. You will write it plain because my ranch can pay its debts. Nora swallowed. Yes, Mrs. Vale. Come by the front gate. Nora understood the boundary and the narrow mercy inside it. She nodded and stepped back. By late afternoon, the recovered cattle stood in Hannah's lower corral. Merritt's men had helped drive them there under Hannah's direction, and every head that passed through the gate was counted aloud. Tom set water in the trough. Ezra sat on the wagon bench under the cottonwood with a plate on his knees, holding the tally string while Hannah called brands. When his hands shook, she waited. When he named the dun steer near the canyon bend, she marked it for mourning. He was not used as proof once and put aside. He was given work that fit the strength he had left. Caleb spent the last light resetting the crooked porch post by the kitchen steps. He asked before touching the tools. Hannah named the auger, the cedar brace, and the nails from her own account, then left him to it while she settled Merritt's count. The post had leaned since spring. When Caleb finished, the roofline held straight, plain, and sound. At dusk, Nora arrived with the ledger. Hannah struck a match from the torn box Nora had slipped her days before and held Royce's posted notice over a shovel blade by the pump. The warning against buyers and neighbors curled black, blistered, and fell into ash. She carried the shovel to the stove, set coffee boiling, and poured Ezra the first cup. She poured one for Merritt, one for Tom, one for Nora, and water for herself. When Caleb came down from the porch with sawdust on his sleeve, she set a cup near the step and waited until he asked before he took it. "May I?" he said. "You may." Nora wrote at the porch table until the ink darkened under lamplight. Hannah signed the salt delivery, the coffee charge, and the new account line in her own hand. Nora struck Royce's purchases from Hannah's page and entered them under Royce Vale. The coffee room key lay beside the ink bottle where everyone could see it. Ezra looked through the open kitchen door at the cot Hannah had made near the stove. "I can hear when people decide where I sleep." "Good," Hannah said. "Then object if you mean to." He looked toward the dark-lined shack, then back at the warm room. "I do not object." After Nora and her father drove away, after Merritt rode toward town with the signed count, after Tom carried his bedroll to the shed, Hannah stood on the porch and watched the last wagon lamp sink beyond the cottonwoods. Caleb waited at the foot of the steps, hat in hand, not on the porch and not yet at the gate. "There is something I would ask," he said. Hannah touched the coffee room key in her pocket, then looked at the corral, the straight porch post, the closed ledger, the hired rider's lantern in the shed, and Ezra's cup near the stove. "Ask it at the gate." Caleb understood. He walked beside her down the path without leading her. Hannah put her hand on the latch. The burned notice lay black in the shovel by the pump. Coffee cooled in the evening air behind her. The porch post stood straight in lamplight. Caleb stopped outside the gate. "Hannah Vale, may I come calling with courtship in mind, on days you choose, by a gate you open yourself." The words asked for no land, no gratitude, no shelter, and no claim. Hannah looked at him through the bars, and the first softness of the day reached her face only after the hard work was done. "I will not be courted because you stood beside me today," she said. "No. Or because Ruby Basin needs a kinder ending to swallow. No. Or because a woman alone makes men restless. No. Then you may come Sunday after chores. Bring coffee if Ezra asks for it. Bring yourself if I ask for you." Caleb's smile came slowly. "And if you do not ask?" Then you wait outside the gate. I can do that. For anyone listening who wants more clean Old West stories about hard choices, earned love, and justice that costs something, subscribe before the trail turns. Hannah opened the latch. She looked once toward the kitchen where Ezra's cup rested by the stove, toward the straight porch post, toward the shovel of burned notice by the pump and the coffee cooling in the yard. Then she turned back to Caleb and invited him through.